Chapter 943. Old Ancestor Nanming nodded and said, "The Immortal Palace's request is to send the person with the highest cultivation other than the sect leader to participate in the war. This request is not a problem for other sects, but for the Mythical Fire Palace, it is a big problem. Because the situation of the Mythical Fire Palace is special, the two palace lords are similar to the sect leader, so they have always been equal. Therefore, they asked the Immortal Palace if they could keep both palace lords. But the Immortal Palace's attitude is very firm. They can only keep one sect leader, unless there is someone with a higher cultivation than them. But the two of them are the founders of the Mythical Fire Palace, so there is no one in the Mythical Fire Palace who has a higher cultivation than them. In this way, one of them has to participate in the war. So, your ancestor is one of the two founders of the Mythical Fire Palace?" Nongzhu touched her chin and laughed. "Old man Nanming, I really didn't know that you have such a big background." Old Ancestor Nanming frowned and said, "The Immortal Palace is powerful, so there was no other way. Second Palace Lord Huajun took the initiative to participate in the war. The Grand Palace Lord Hualai was very touched, so he asked second brother to stay and decided to go alone. Anyway, both of them are in the early Immortal Emperor stage, so it doesn't matter who stays. But in the end, second brother listed all kinds of reasons and insisted on going, so the first brother had no choice but to agree. But unexpectedly, on the eve of departure, second brother got into a dispute with a sect called the Heavenly Robe Sect and was injured by them. Even if he wanted to participate in the war, the Immortal Palace wouldn't agree. So the next day, eldest brother took second brother's place and came to the human world to participate in the war against the demon lord of 10,000 swords. TSK. So you are the descendant of the Grand Palace Lord who founded the Mythical Fire Palace." Nongzhu sighed and said, "I have heard of the Tianyi sect who injured second brother in the illusionary Immortal City, but they were eradicated by the Mythical Fire Palace a long time ago. That war seems to have caused quite a big impact in the immortal world. Even now, people are still talking about it. It seems that the Tianyi sect suffered because they had a feud with the leader of the Mythical Fire Palace. No wonder." On the other hand, Yu Qianzhou frowned and muttered, "He was injured on the day before we set off. What a coincidence." He had always been a suspicious person. Whenever he encountered something like this, he would be suspicious. To put it nicely, he was farsighted and prepared for a rainy day. To put it bluntly, he was gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Nongzhu was not good at quarreling when it came to serious matters. Otherwise, he would not have been chosen as the successor of the previous two punishment masters of the Demon Ghost region. Hearing what Yu Qianzhou said, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and squinted at the ancestor of Nanming, saying, "Old man Nanming, there may be some hidden story behind this. The timing is too coincidental. Most importantly, think about what time it was. That was when the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch was wreaking havoc in both the immortal and netherworld. At that time, the various sects would have restrained themselves. It's not right for something like this to happen at this time." The ancestor of Nanming looked at the two of them and nodded, saying, "You're right. There is indeed a hidden story behind this. Boss came to the human world and participated in several encirclements against the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. Luckily, he did not die. In one fierce battle, he saved a deacon of the Heavenly Robe Sect. In fact, he did not mean to save him, but at that stage, everyone had no way out and could only unite to fight against the enemy. When they could help each other, they would help each other. However, the deacon was seriously injured and could not be saved. Before he died, out of gratitude to Boss, he revealed a secret. It turned out that there was another hidden story behind the conflict between the second brother and the Heavenly Robe Sect. In order not to take the risk of participating in this battle, he conspired with some people in the Heavenly Robe Sect to put on a show and finally persuaded Boss to participate in the battle. Alas! That deacon of the Heavenly Robe Sect was one of the people involved in the show. Nongzhu sighed and shook her head, saying, "Alas! Boss must be heartbroken after knowing this. It must not feel good to be schemed against by one's own brother. I just don't understand that second brother. Since Boss had already said that he would participate in the battle, why did he have to fight endlessly with Boss? Isn't this an unnecessary move? Yes, Boss was very sad. In the beginning, he did not believe it, but he knew that the words of a dying man are kind. There was no need for that deacon of the heavenly robe sect to lie to him before he died. Later on, when he thought about second brother's previous actions, there were indeed some loopholes. It was just that he trusted his brother too much and did not suspect anything. Elder ancestor Nan Ming sighed. You are the same kind of person as second brother. What do you think of this? Nongzhu asked Yu Qianzhou. You are the same kind of person as second brother. Yu Qianzhou immediately retorted, but then he frowned and said, when it comes to things like history, the general framework shouldn't be wrong, but the minor details can't be completely trusted. You can't just blindly follow what everyone says. I'm afraid only the people involved know what exactly happened best. Oh. Nongzhu's eyes lit up, and she said, did you see something? Why don't you say it and let us hear your wise opinion? Elder ancestor Nan Ming looked over, also wanting to hear what wise opinion Yu Qianzhou had. It's not a wise opinion, but Senior Nan Ming, please don't be angry when I say it. It's just my guess. Yu Qianzhou smiled. Elder ancestor Nan Ming smiled and said, it's something that happened 100,000 years ago. Is there a need for me to be angry? Just say it, I'm all ears. Yu Qianzhou nodded and organized his thoughts. Then, he said, not everything that comes out of a person's mouth is the truth, even though that boss is your ancestor. Naturally, I'm not saying that your ancestor is lying. It's just that this matter has already passed for 100,000 years. We have no way to verify the truth unless the Lifire Palace leader, Hua Jun, is willing to announce the truth. But that's impossible. However, I don't think that the words that Huolai left behind for your descendants are true. I reckon that not many ancestors would purposely leave their ugly side for their descendants to admire. You don't have to talk about the big theory. Nongzhu urged, just tell me directly what's wrong with Huolai's words. Purple bamboo leaves swirled and floated down from time to time in the bamboo jade paradise. The two women in the courtyard stared at the three men talking loudly. The three men's expressions and actions were sometimes arguing fiercely, sometimes frowning, and sometimes beaming with joy. Although the two women couldn't hear what they were saying, they could more or less feel the unique charm of the men when they were talking about serious matters. Men in such situations were often more attractive to women. However, most of the time, the two women's gazes were focused on Yu Qianzhou. At this time, Yu Qianzhou's status and cultivation were much higher than the other two. The aura that unconsciously leaked out from his words and actions was obviously a notch higher than the other two. One had to admit that it was easy to attract the women's attention. That's the problem. As you said before, since the big brother has already said that he wants to participate in the war, then why does the second brother have to fight endlessly? It is indeed an unnecessary move. Yu Qianzhou's gaze suddenly became deep. He narrowed his eyes and said, but the crux of the problem is, if the big brother really wants to participate in the war, and the second brother really doesn't want to risk coming to the human world to participate in the war, I can't think of any reason for the second brother to deliberately beat around the bush. He just needs to decline slightly. If the big brother really wants to leave for the sake of his younger brother, the second brother can easily stay. I'm just afraid that the truth is that the big brother is the one pretending to decline. Nongzhu slowly nodded and said, that makes sense. I think I understand what you mean. Ancestor Nan Ming fell into deep thought. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the two of them and continued, you must know that the second brother colluded with the people of Tianyi sect to plot against the big brother. He took a great risk. Once the people of Tianyi sect threaten the second brother afterwards, the consequences can be imagined. In fact, it is impossible for the people of Tianyi sect to help for nothing. After that, they will definitely use this to threaten the mythical fire palace to obtain their own benefits. I'm afraid that the reason why the Tianyi sect was finally eliminated by the mythical fire palace must have something to do with this. It is highly likely that the second brother wants to silence the second brother. Yu Qianqiu finally asked, think about it again. If the big brother really wanted to participate in the war, why would the second brother pay such a great price and take such a great risk? Then the truth is very likely that after the mythical fire palace received the decree from the immortal palace, one of the two brothers had to participate in the war. But the two brothers were actually not willing to take the risk because at that time, the myriad swords demon monarch's limelight was too strong. With the strength of one person, he could fight against the huge forces of the immortal and netherworld alone. He was completely invincible in the three realms. How many people would not be afraid of him? Nongzhu nodded and said, in other words, the two brothers actually did not want to participate in the war, so they pretended to decline. And the second brother was a little more scheming. Although he pretended to decline, he pretended to be serious and insisted on going. Because he was too decisive, even the big brother did not see through it. But it was to the big brother's liking, so the big brother pretended to agree reluctantly. Little did he know that the second brother was farsighted. In order to save his life, he played a dirty trick at the critical moment. The big brother was fooled just like that. He did not even know that he was betrayed by his own brother. Instead, he shed tears of gratitude and went to participate in the war. Who knew that after that, he accidentally found out the truth in the human world? I guess he was almost mad at that time. Who knows how he made up his second brother in his last words? After the analysis, he turned to old ancestor Nan Ming and asked, Old man Nan Ming, did your big brother's ancestor's last words scold the second brother to be worse than a pig or a dog? Old ancestor Nan Ming was speechless. Although he did not know whether the analysis of the two fellows was right or wrong, it was indeed very possible. And the ancestor's last words were indeed as Nongzhu said, scolding the current mythical fire palace's sect leader Huajun to be worse than a pig or a dog, and was very shameless. Seeing that old ancestor Nan Ming's face did not look too good, Yu Qianqiu kindly comforted him, Senior Nan Ming, actually. You may not be happy to hear this. Although the second brother is unscrupulous, it is obvious that his strategy is better than the big brother's. The current mythical fire palace's sect leader Huajun's cultivation has reached the intermediate immortal emperor stage. He is one of the top experts in the immortal world. The mythical fire palace can stand tall in the immortal world where thousands of sects fight against each other, and its strength can even be ranked at the top, all thanks to sect leader Huajun's contributions. To put it bluntly, if the mythical fire palace was controlled by the big brother, it might not be where it is today. Maybe it would have collapsed long ago. 100,000 years. That is not a small amount of time. There are countless sects in the immortal world that have declined and been annihilated. The reason why the mythical fire palace can stand tall until now and become one of the top ancient sects in the immortal world is worth pondering. So, your ancestors' loss was not unjust. Chapter 944. Yes. Nongzhu nodded and said, second brother is really good. Not only did he retreat before advancing, but he also played a trick to confuse big brother. He even cried and shouted to go with us. Big brother is really touched by this brotherly love. Unfortunately, there was an accident. The eldest brother didn't expect that it was his beloved younger brother who was playing dirty. Therefore, the eldest brother was willing to die without any complaints. If the eldest brother didn't happen to know the truth, perhaps he would still remember the brotherly relationship until the day he died. TSK. Second brother is really powerful. No wonder mythical fire palace can survive for so long. I say, old man Nanming, don't be angry anymore. After all, if you count your ancestors' generation, you and the current mythical fire palace sect leader Huajun are the same ancestor. The matter has already passed for so long, let the past be in the past. Did I say what I'm complaining about? The Nanming ancestor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know why these two fellows were consoling him here. He immediately rolled his eyes and said, "I say, have the two of you already made friends with the people of the Lifefire Palace in the immortal world? If not, why are you guys speaking up for the Lifefire Palace?" Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu were speechless at the same time. Ancestor Nanming hit the nail on the head. Yu Qianqiu really did become friends with the mythical Fire Palace, although it was a false friendship. Nongzhu hurriedly said, "Old Nanming, from what you said before, did your ancestor pass down the craftsmanship of refining treasures from the mythical Fire Palace?" Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of this, and his eyes lit up. Ancestor Nanming paused and said after a moment of silence, "Yes. It was indeed passed down. Originally, my ancestor was lucky enough to survive until the last battle against the demon monarch of thousand swords in the immortal world and the underworld. He could have returned to the immortal world to settle the score with second brother. Who knew that at this time, the sky would change, and countless golden thunderbolts that had never been seen before fell from the sky. Golden thunderbolts? Really? Nongzhu was stunned. Yu Qianqiu was not surprised, because he had heard from Bai Changchun that there were indeed countless golden thunderbolts cleansing the human world. As for what happened, he did not know. It shouldn't be fake. Grandmaster Nanming recalled and said, "My ancestor's last words said that the power of that golden thunderbolt was very strong. It almost killed all the experts of the immortal realm and the netherworld who were wandering in the mortal world. Even the Emperor of the immortal realm and the Emperor of the underworld couldn't escape. Luckily, the cultivation of those two was indeed strong. However, it still scared the two supreme martial artists of the immortal realm and the netherworld so much that they fled in panic. My ancestor was lucky. Although he wasn't directly struck by the golden thunderbolt, he was still implicated by the aftershock. He was an early-stage immortal emperor expert, and he became immortal." Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other. Even the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld had to flee. Therefore, the power of the golden thunderbolt was unimaginably terrifying. Nongzhu asked in confusion, no matter what, he was an early-stage immortal emperor expert. Even if his cultivation was destroyed, he shouldn't have degenerated into a mortal with the strength of his body. Grandmaster Nanming shook his head and said, "I don't know why my ancestor was beaten into a mortal. In the end, we can only blame it on the wrath of heaven." Yu Qianqiu was thoughtful when he heard this. He used thunder and lightning to forge his immortal body. Maybe the golden thunderbolt could really beat an immortal cultivator into a mortal. Not only was he beaten into a mortal, but his dantian was also destroyed. Grandmaster Nanming sighed and said, "In this way, the possibility of my ancestor returning to the immortal realm was completely cut off. Think about it, how long can a person live after becoming immortal? The limit of his lifespan became the biggest problem. My ancestor felt that death was approaching step by step, but he was still unwilling. He married a wife and had children in the mortal world. Before he died, he left a will for his descendants, hoping that one of them would return to the immortal realm to help him take revenge and regain the power of the mythical Fire Palace. However, his descendants were only mediocre mortals. They didn't have the aptitude to cultivate. Fortunately, after experiencing all kinds of calamities for 100,000 years, the inheritance didn't break until I was born." Sigh. However, the path of immortal ascension is long and difficult. Moreover, there's no need for me, a descendant, to continue the hatred from 100,000 years ago. Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu sighed. They didn't expect a dignified early-stage immortal emperor expert to end up like this. They couldn't help but sigh at how unfortunate his fate was. Since Grandmaster Nanming has the refining skills of the mythical Fire Palace, it seems that there's no need to go to the God Ruin realm to steal the craftsmanship of the Ape King. Nongzhu glanced at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Maybe I'm ignorant." Yu Qianqiu pondered for a moment and said, "But I think the craftsmanship of the Ape King is indeed extraordinary. Senior Nanming, why don't you take a trip with me? If it's really not worth mentioning, we'll come back. All right. I'll go with you to take a look. Grandmaster Nan Ming's tone was filled with pride. Yu Qianqiu immediately smiled and removed the soundproof enchantment. He walked straight to Furong, who was looking forward to seeing him. He held Furong's hand and said, I'm leaving again. Furong just nodded and said, I'll wait for you to come back. I'll come and pick you up as soon as possible. Yu Qianqiu looked around after letting go of her hand. There was a hint of doubt in his expression. Furong smiled and said, Sister Yen and the others are cultivating in seclusion in the backyard. They're preparing to help you in the future. Let's go and see them. Yu Qianqiu immediately released his divine sense to scan the backyard. He saw that Yen Yu and the Enchantress of 100 Charms were sitting cross-legged in a row of quiet bamboo houses in the backyard, concentrating on cultivating. Seeing that the two of them were fine, he shook his head and said, I won't disturb them for now. Furong obediently agreed. Yu Qianqiu then took out a flying shuttle and flew into the sky. He turned and raised his hand to Grandmaster Nan Ming and said, Senior Nan Ming, follow me to the East Holy Land first. Grandmaster Nan Ming nodded and leaped onto the flying shuttle. Speaking of the East Holy Land, Nongzhu seemed to have thought of something. She asked in a flash, Why are you gathering all the cultivators who know how to refine pills to the East Holy Land? You'll know in the future. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and bid farewell. Zi, who had been ignored for a long time, suddenly shouted, Big liar, where are you going? Take me to play with you. Play with me on the bed? Are you coming? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and ignored her. He teleported onto the flying shuttle and drove it away like a stream of light. Zi was so angry that she stomped her feet and cursed him for being a big liar. Nongzhu stared at Zi in a daze. She had 1,000 thoughts in her mind, but she didn't know what to say. She only felt bitterness in her mouth, and her whole body was filled with powerlessness. The current Yu Qianqiu was no longer the same as before. Nongzhu was completely powerless to control him. Although Zi liked him, she didn't know how to please a man. Yu Qianqiu was also someone who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. How was he supposed to fulfill his daughter's happiness? On the flying shuttle, Grandmaster Nan Ming was secretly speechless at Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. He felt that the speed at which Yu Qianqiu drove the flying shuttle seemed to be faster than a cultivator at the last stage of the soul formation realm. It was no wonder that he wanted to use the flying shuttle to carry him. Little did he know that if it wasn't for the fact that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to expose his ability to teleport between realms to too many people, he would have brought him to the Divine Ruin realm long ago. There was no need for him to come to the Eastern Holy Land. This was the first time Grandmaster Nan Ming visited the underground palace left behind by the cultivators of the Netherworld. After learning that it was a teleportation formation, he didn't even have time to look at it in detail before the scene in front of him changed. He was in a dark and dense forest that covered the sky. Stepping on the thick rotten leaves, Grandmaster Nan Ming looked around at the unknown ancient trees around him and asked in shock, This is the Divine Ruin realm? Yes. Follow me. Yu Qianqiu called out and dashed out of the forest. Grandmaster Nan Ming followed. Yu Qianqiu waved his arm and pointed at the maroon mountain in the distance that was emitting black smoke. That is the great flaming mountain where the Ape King lives. It is indeed a good place to refine things, Grandmaster Nan Ming judged with the eyes of an expert. After Yu Qianqiu told him some things to take note of and avoid, the two of them dashed forward together. In a short while, they arrived in front of the cave at the mountainside of the Great Flaming Mountain. When someone barged in, the great strength fire apes in the various caves on the mountain immediately roared and roared. When they saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, they quieted down. It was Grandmaster Nan Ming's first time seeing the great strength fire apes, so he naturally couldn't help but take a few more glances. Yu Qianqiu was just about to call out to the Ape King when it was alarmed by the commotion outside the cave. Ha! Brother Yu is finally here, the Ape King said with a laugh. When it saw Grandmaster Nan Ming, it guessed that he should be the person that Yu Qianzhou mentioned. It couldn't help but size him up carefully. When it realized that he only had the cultivation of middle-stage deity transformation, it couldn't help but look a little doubtful. It wondered if this person was really an expert in this field. After Yu Qianzhou introduced the two of them, Grandmaster Nan Ming felt a little apprehensive. After all, it was his first time seeing a great immortal realm cultivator. His gaze lingered on the metal vest on the Ape King's body. It was probably the one that Yu Qianzhou mentioned. The Ape King then waved its hand toward the cave and said, "Please come in. Let me see Mr. Nan Ming's refining skills." He. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said politely, "We are guests, so how can we usurp the host's position? Brother Ape, you should let us see your superb skills first." He had made up his mind. If Grandmaster Nan Ming liked the Ape King's skills, then he would talk about it. If not, then he would not waste time and send Grandmaster Nan Ming back as soon as possible. All right. The Ape King waved its hand straightforwardly. "Please come in." It led the two of them into the cave. The cave was spacious enough to accommodate 7 to 8 people walking side by side at the same time. Waves of heat surged out from the inside. After walking for a short distance, there was a stone staircase that slowly led downwards. The three of them quickly arrived at the belly of the empty mountain that was emitting red light. There were many giant-strength fire apes moving about inside. Looking up, the great flaming mountain was hollow. It was like looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. They could see the blue sky and white clouds above. The Ape King looked at the two of them who were looking around. Suddenly, it let out a roar that reverberated in the empty mountain. Immediately, as if it had issued a command, many running footsteps could be heard from the small caves around them. 2 giant-strength fire apes carried the big spider's corpse out. Chapter 945. He. The caverns of all sizes around the empty mountainside were suddenly filled with uniform chants that sounded like the pulling of a rope. Then, the sound of drums rose and fell continuously. On the rocky ground in the center of the mountainside that was emitting red light, countless red flames shot out from the cracks of the rocks as if something was blowing them out from the ground. As the flames rose higher and higher, the red flames gradually turned from red to green and white like a sharp glint. Yu Qianzhou and ancestor Nan Ming were both curious. They released their divine senses to investigate the surrounding caverns of all sizes. They saw that below those caverns, there were large iron boxes embedded in the stone walls. The airflow was rushing, and a group of giant-strength fire apes were pushing and pulling a huge piston rod in front of the iron box. It was actually a bellow. There was naturally more than one bellow like this. There was one bellow in all the caverns of all sizes. Yu Qianzhou and ancestor Nan Ming looked at each other. The former immediately transmitted his voice to the latter, "Do you guys also do this when you forge?" The latter paused and replied, "This is the most primitive method." "Are you sure that his forging skills are really unique?" The former was speechless for a moment before replying, "Let's wait a little longer. Maybe he has found another way to do it." The two then saw the 2 giant-strength fire apes carrying the huge spider's corpse suddenly throw something into the green and white blazing fire formation that was 100 meters in radius. Bang! Rubble flew everywhere with sparks. The sound of drums did not stop. It was obvious that the fire apes had been pushing and pulling with all their might. The three of them stared at the huge spider's corpse that was burning in the flames for a long time, but they did not see any change in the huge spider's corpse. The Ape King had his hands behind his back and his legs slightly spread apart. He stood there with a righteous and awe-inspiring air, appearing to be very patient. Yu Qianzhou and ancestor Nan Ming thought that he was going to do something shocking, but after waiting for a long time, they gradually realized that something was wrong. Could it be that, cough, cough? Yu Qianzhou coughed and asked, "Brother Ape, didn't you want to show us your forging skills?" What are you waiting for? The Ape King turned around and looked at him as if he was an amateur. He waved his hand and pointed at the huge spider's corpse in the flames. Naturally, I am waiting for the fire force to clear before I forge. Ah, Grandmaster Nanming's cultivation base was the lowest among them. Originally, he had been waiting patiently even if he was impatient. However, when he heard the Ape King's words, he could not help but turn around and cry out in surprise together with Yu Qianqiu. Is there a problem? The Ape King was puzzled. Grandmaster Nanming could not help but ask, are you going to keep waiting like this? The Ape King immediately snorted coldly and said, do you have a better idea? That. Yu Qianqiu swallowed hard and interrupted, don't worry, Brother Ape. What he meant was, how long will it take for the fire force to be fully activated? The Ape King looked at the burning flames with a serious expression and said, the shell of the temple rainbow spider is extraordinarily hard. It will take at least 10 days and 10 nights for the fire to penetrate it. 10 days and 10 nights? Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise again. This time, he did not plan to give face to the Ape King. He did not have so much time to play with him slowly. He turned and asked Grandmaster Nanming, do you have any way to make it faster? In reality, he could easily solve this problem himself. However, he was not too familiar with the situation in the Divine Ruin Realm. It was not convenient for him to take out the blue and purple flames to show off. It's very simple. Most master refiners will use some external objects to raise the temperature of the fire, such as using kerosene and the like. Grandmaster Nanming glanced at the Ape King as if he was worried that he would be unhappy. When he saw that the Ape King was also listening attentively, he felt relieved and continued, however, true master refiners are more or less proficient in the arrangement of formations. This is because a good artifact has the existence of formations integrated into it. Whether a treasure is good or not, other than the key factor of raw materials, the fusion of the formation and the treasure is also very important. We usually see all kinds of miraculous effects from treasures, and this is all because of the formation. Because they are proficient in formations, most of them will set up a fire-gathering formation at the place of refinement to condense the strongest fire temperature to speed up the smelting of the artifact. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and looked at the Ape King with a disdainful expression. He thought to himself, old monkey, look at him. This is a true master refiner. Just the theoretical knowledge that he talks about is already set after set. It's hard to not be convinced. Unlike you, who is still using such a primitive method. Formation? The Ape King was stunned. Back then, he had only unintentionally seen an ordinary cultivator forging things. What he saw was similar to an ordinary blacksmith forging iron. There was no way he could be compared to a blacksmith who was an expert in blacksmithing like the Nanming ancestor. In the endless months that followed, he had been fumbling around by himself. He had never come into contact with a master refiner like the Grandmaster Nanming, so it was not strange that he did not know. Brother Ape, why don't you let Mr. Nanming help you set up a fire-gathering formation? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the place where the flames were blazing. The Ape King came back to his senses and immediately cupped his hands at the Grandmaster Nanming. Please enlighten me, Mr. Nanming. He revealed a hint of modesty now, but he still wore an expectant look on his face. It was as if he was waiting to see if Mr. Nanming was good at talking or doing well. The Grandmaster Nanming did not stand on ceremony. He took out a handful of spirit stones from his storage pouch and threw them into the stone walls around the flames. One handful was not enough, so he took out dozens of top-grade spirit stones in succession. Only then was he able to set up a complicated formation in the belly of the mountain. After setting up the formation, he pinched his fingers and cast several spells into the formation. The fire-gathering formation was immediately activated. In an instant, the airflow in the belly of the mountain surged and condensed violently. The Ape King and Yu Qianqiu could only feel the rolling heat waves in the belly of the mountain diminishing rapidly. They were suddenly swallowed back to the center of the mountain where the heat was spreading. The greenish-white flames that emerged from the cracks of the crushed stones on the ground looked as if they had encountered a tornado. The flames that rose high up in the sky began to swirl and gather toward the giant spider's corpse that was burning in the center. The Grand Master Nan Ming then cast several spells to adjust the formation. The greenish-white flames that were sweeping toward them were like flowing clouds, wrapping around the giant spider's corpse and burning it to its heart's content. The effect of the gathering and burning was probably dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than before. The scene was very magical. In fact, this was also the first time Yu Qianzhou had seen a master refiner in action. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder. The Ape King's expression was somewhat sluggish. After being dumbfounded for a while, it turned to look at the Grandmaster Nan Ming with a gaze filled with fanaticism. Half a day later, the giant spider's corpse began to emit waves of a disgusting stench. It was obvious that the high temperature of the rolling flames had destroyed its internal organs. It was estimated that all of its internal organs would be burnt to ashes soon. Then, a slightly red carapace gradually appeared in the greenish-white flames. When it turned completely red, the Grandmaster Nan Ming cast another spell into the formation. In an instant, it turned into a ball of burning flames that quickly spread out to its original state. The high temperature also quickly filled the entire belly of the mountain. The fire force has been penetrated. Ape King, you can begin now, the Grandmaster Nan Ming said with a confident smile. However, after the Ape King had seen the Grandmaster Nan Ming's methods, he did not seem so confident anymore. He cupped his hands in a humble manner and said, "Mr. Nan Ming is an expert in this field. There is no need for me to embarrass myself anymore." As he said this, he waved his arm and pointed at the red carapace. He said politely, "Please give me some pointers, Mr. Nan Ming." The Grandmaster Nan Ming looked at Yu Qianzhou to seek his opinion. Yu Qianzhou immediately coughed and interrupted, "Brother Ape, since you want Mr. Nan Ming to give you pointers, you should at least let Mr. Nan Ming take a look at your abilities first. Otherwise, how can he teach you? Brother Ape, why don't you display your refining methods to your heart's content and let Mr. Nan Ming take a look first?" "All right." The Ape King was a straightforward person. After he cupped his hands in greeting at the Grandmaster Nan Ming, he took a step forward and a majestic aura suddenly erupted from his body. The bones in his body made explosive sounds and he seemed to have grown taller in an instant. His fiery red hair moved without any wind and the muscles that were exposed outside the metal vest swelled. The muscles on his arms were like steel wires that were twisted together, protruding and wriggling. One look and one could tell that he was filled with explosive power. "Hi!" The Ape King's right arm suddenly struck forward and a huge shadow of an illusory palm grabbed the red carapace. After that, he twisted his body and waved his arm at an incredible speed, throwing the red carapace behind him. With a dang, it landed steadily on the dark platform behind him. Then, the Ape King suddenly spread out his arms. Wang, red flames instantly erupted from his body and enveloped his entire body. Under the astonished gaze of the Grandmaster Nan Ming, the Ape King charged towards the red carapace like a cannonball while carrying raging flames. He took advantage of the momentum and struck out a huge shadow of his fist at lightning speed, smashing it on the red carapace. Dang, bright sparks flew everywhere. The first punch was followed by thousands of punches. Deafening, dang, sounds that were as dense as raindrops rang violently in the belly of the mountain and bright sparks flew everywhere. In just a few breaths' time, countless figures that carried raging flames appeared around the red and transparent carapace. Tens of thousands of fiery fists struck out like a storm and all of them landed heavily on the bright red carapace of the spider. It couldn't be, right? Yu Qianzhou and the Grandmaster Nan Ming looked at this scene in a daze. Fiery fists surrounded the red carapace hammer in front of their eyes. Never in their dreams would they have thought that the Ape King would use his fists as hammers to hammer things. What was the difference between this and forging iron? Senior Nan Ming, with your eyesight, can you tell what he's doing? Yu Qianzhou transmitted his voice to the Grandmaster Nan Ming. It should be the most primitive forging method. But I can't be sure. Let's wait and see. After the Grandmaster Nan Ming replied, his pupils suddenly shrank and he stared at the dark platform that was enduring the forging. With the Ape King's cultivation, the countless heavy punches that he had unleashed could even cause a mountain to collapse. However, the black platform's endurance was so strong that it was unbelievable. No matter how many punches were thrown at it, it would not budge. After another half a day, the bright red carapace of the spider finally began to shrink bit by bit under the bombardment of countless heavy punches. Chapter 946. The strange thing was that after such a long time, the red color of the carapace should have gradually dimmed due to the heat dissipating. However, the spider's carapace didn't seem to be affected by the Ape King's concentrated attacks. Even after half a day had passed, it still maintained its bright red heat. Yu Qianzhou understood the reason after pondering for a while. It was probably related to the Ape King's blazing fists and the raging flames that surged out of its body. The Ape King moved quickly with flames all over its body. It was as if it was using fire to wrap around the spider's carapace to prevent it from cooling down. In addition to the violent and concentrated blazing fists, even a piece of dark steel would be scorched by it. What a one-track mind. As Yu Qianzhou sighed, he glanced at elder ancestor Nan Ming and immediately realized that something was wrong. He followed the elder's gaze and also noticed that there was something strange about the pitch-black platform. He transmitted his voice and asked, "Elder Nan Ming, is the platform that withstood the tempering a treasure?" "I can't tell what it is either, but it must be a treasure to be able to withstand such heavy attacks," elder ancestor Nan Ming said with certainty. 3 days passed by just like that. The spider's carapace had long changed beyond recognition. Its huge body that was about 10 meters long had become a 2-meter square metal block. Even so, the Ape King continued to swing its blazing fists. Not only did its momentum not weaken, the sounds became even more intense. Of course, this was related to the shrinking of its body and the shrinking of its range of movement. This way, the intensity of the attacks on the metal block became even more concentrated. When the 6th day passed, the 2-meter square metal block became less than a meter. Yu Qianzhou went from being dumbfounded to feeling numb. He couldn't help but admire the Ape King's profound cultivation. This was 6 consecutive days of intense consumption. Yu Qianzhou naturally didn't have the patience and time to stay here and slowly waste his time. Every day, he would go out to deal with his own matters and check out the surrounding terrain. However, elder ancestor Nan Ming's gaze gradually became fiery. He seemed to have understood something. He stared at the gradually shrinking metal block day after day without blinking. When Yu Qianzhou returned from his routine trip, he saw that the Ape King was still swinging its fists like rain. He cursed the Ape King in his heart for not being afraid of dying from exhaustion. After waiting for a while, he felt like he was about to doze off again. When he saw that Grandmaster Nan Ming was full of energy, he sent him a voice transmission out of boredom. "Senior Nan Ming, is there any meaning to this fellow's actions?" "Yes, of course there is." Grandmaster Nan Ming was a little excited as he transmitted his voice and exclaimed, "So that's how it is." Who would have thought that a stupid method would have its own benefits? Fortunately, he was gifted. If it was someone else, no matter how high their cultivation was, it would be difficult for them to continuously temper themselves and return to their original state. Every time he punches, some of the impurities in the metal will be expelled. If this continues, all the impurities in the metal will be expelled until it can no longer shrink. At that time, what will be left will be the essence of the metal. "I see. What are the benefits?" Yu Qianzhou asked. He pondered that if the effect was really great, his gold incantation should be able to display its usefulness in this aspect. It would be much better than the Ape King's stupid method. Grandmaster Nan Ming explained excitedly, "You must know that the purer the quality of the material, the stronger its extensibility and capacity. For example, a piece of pig iron, if it hasn't been tempered to remove its impurities, its extensibility will definitely be very poor and it will break easily. However, after being tempered to remove its impurities, you will be able to bend it, but it won't break easily. This is extensibility. In other words, it can contain more formations, and the treasures refined will also be of higher quality. This is a great benefit to the refiner. Moreover, this material is the shell of the rainbow temple spider, which is already abnormally hard. His explanation immediately piqued Yu Qianzhou's interest. He couldn't help but look forward to the Ape King's early completion. In the end, they waited for the 10th day. As the storm-like fiery fists gradually died down, the flames on the Ape King's body also disappeared. Finally, it stopped while sweating profusely and panting. With a pale face, it walked down with a palm-sized piece of metal that was still fiery red. However, its body was a little shaky. It was obvious that it had used up a lot of its cultivation. This big spider's body contains a lot of armor essence. In the past, I hunted 1,000 ordinary rainbow temple spiders, but the amount of armor essence in one of its bodies was not even as much. Mr. Nanming, what do you think? The Ape King said while panting. Yu Qianzhou's gaze was filled with admiration as he looked at the Ape King. At this moment, the consumption of his cultivation was probably 80 to 90% of his prime. If he encountered someone with ulterior motives, it could be said to be the most dangerous moment. However, it had no distractions towards the two of them. It was a sincere and magnanimous person, worth associating with. Not bad, not bad. Such a good thing can be said to be perfect. It can definitely be used to refine a top-notch treasure. The Nanming patriarch exclaimed in admiration as he held the piece of metal that was gradually cooling. However, he then said with some regret, "It's a pity that there's too little. Otherwise, I would exhaust all my abilities to display my expertise in this and see what kind of good treasure I can refine. There's more here." The Ape King shouted hurriedly. Then, it eagerly took off the vest and boots on its feet and offered them with both hands. "As long as Mr. is willing to teach me how to refine treasures, I am willing to give all of these to you." The Nanming patriarch was stunned. He took the items in the Ape King's hands and compared them. Only then did he realize that they were made of the same material as the piece of metal. In his excitement, he glanced at Yu Qianzhou. He seemed to be a little hesitant. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and said, "Brother Ape, the art of refining treasures is Mr. Nanming's specialty. He usually won't teach it to outsiders. If you acknowledge him as your master, then it'll be a different story." As he spoke, he even gave the Ape King a look. The Ape King was stunned, but he immediately reacted. He knelt down at the Nanming patriarch and bowed. Disciple Yuan Hong pays respect to master. The Nanming patriarch's expression froze. He transmitted his voice to Yu Qianzhou, "This is too childish. His cultivation base is much higher than mine. How can I be his master? You're being pedantic. There's no seniority in learning. The one who's accomplished comes first. Besides, he's not asking you to teach him cultivation. He's learning your skills in refining treasures. In this aspect, you're good enough to be his master." Yu Qianzhou transmitted his voice. "Besides, there's only benefits to you if you can take in a disciple with such a high cultivation base. At the same time, it'll also be beneficial to my future arrangements. Just take it as giving me face and take him in. As for how much you should teach him, it's up to you. No one can force you to do this, right?" He had his own plans. He had brought the army of Utopia to the Divine Ruin Realm for two reasons. Firstly, he was prepared to use the ferocious beasts in the Divine Ruin Realm to train them. Secondly, he wanted the army to use the training opportunity to collect the inner cores of the ferocious beasts so as to help Baisuzhen master the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra as soon as possible. However, this area was the Ape King's territory. It would be beneficial for the army of Utopia to have a good relationship with the Ape King. It would be even better if they could take care of him. Just as he was pondering how he could forge a good relationship with the Ape King, the Nanming Patriarch's appearance solved the problem. The Nanming Patriarch pondered for a while before freeing one of his hands to help the kneeling Ape King up. Since that's the case, I'll take you in. Get up. Thank you, Master. The Ape King cupped his hands in excitement and stood up. He could not suppress the agitation on his face. Yu Qianzhou looked at him and shook his head with a bitter smile. He felt envious and speechless toward this kind of person who was obsessed with something simple and pure. Then, he stretched out his hand and took the Ape King's smelly boots from the Nanming Patriarch's hands. He then took out the big spider's jaws. He held one item in each hand and closed his eyes to sense them carefully. The Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King looked at him in confusion. They did not know what he was going to do. I see. I understand now. After Yu Qianzhou felt the difference in the structure of the items in his hands, he opened his eyes and threw the smelly boots in his right hand back to the Nanming Patriarch. Then, he activated the Nanming art. The dust from the spider's jaws danced in the air and gradually became smaller. Soon, a small light golden metal ball appeared in his hand. The Ape King was secretly shocked. He naturally knew how hard the jaws were. They were the hardest part of a spider's body and also the part that contained the densest amount of armor essence. However, he did not expect that they would be turned into ashes in the blink of an eye in Yu Qianzhou's hands. It was too terrifying. He did not know how high this person's cultivation was. That was not all. Yu Qianzhou took out the 8 spider legs one by one and performed the same Nanming art. In a short while, a total of 9 metal balls appeared in his hands. Yu Qianzhou held them in one palm and extended them in front of the Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King. He asked with a smile, Master and disciple, take a look. Is this the same thing that Ape Yuan Hong refined? The master and disciple picked up a metal ball suspiciously and examined it. After looking at it, both of them were shocked. The Ape King's face became even paler. He had used his proudest and most capable ability to refine something that he had spent many days to refine, but in the hands of this person, he could do it in just a snap of his fingers. The difference was too big. The Nanming Patriarch was flabbergasted. How did you do it? Yu Qianzhou did not think much of it and stuffed the 9 metal balls into the Nanming Patriarch's arms. He said with a smile, I'll give this to you. Even though it's a little lacking, it shouldn't be a problem to refine this little guy, right? Do me a favor. When you're free, help me refine a good treasure. As he said this, he pointed at the dark platform and asked the Ape King, Yuan Hong, what is this? Why does it feel even harder than the Temple Rainbow Spider's armor essence? The Nanming Patriarch looked over. This was actually a question he wanted to ask as well. The Ape King shook his head. It is indeed harder than the Temple Rainbow Spider's armor essence, but I don't know what it is. Its original form is a huge meteorite that flew from the heavens and landed nearby. I saw that it contained quite a lot of metal, so I broke the meteorite apart and brought it back in batches to be smelted. I used the same refining method as before and used 50,000 years on and off. In the end, it ended up like this. Chapter 947. Yu Qianzhou walked to the black platform that was 3 to 4 meters thick, 100 meters long, and 40 to 50 meters wide to take a look. He could not help but sigh inwardly. This old monkey was really persistent. He had actually spent almost 50,000 years to refine this huge metal plate. It really left him speechless. He then turned his head back and asked curiously, Yuan Hong, since it's harder than the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence, why don't you use it to refine the armor you're wearing? I'm really ashamed. The Ape King cupped his hands at the Nanming Patriarch and explained, it's not that I don't want to, it's because this thing is too hard. My clumsy method of forging a huge piece of metal is still passable, but it's too difficult to forge it into a well-connected armor. It's so difficult that I had no choice but to give up. It just so happens that the thing I'm forging lacks a sturdy base, so I made do with it. But now that Master is here, I'm sure Master will have a way to solve this. He then pointed at the crushed stones that were emitting the red light of the earth fire on the ground at the center of the mountain and said, "These crushed stones are the remains of that meteorite from beyond the heavens. There's still some metal in them, but it's precisely because I have no use for them after refining them that I might as well fill the earth fire and use them as scattered anvils when refining things." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly when he heard that. He stroked his chin and looked at the huge metal plate under his feet. His eyes lit up slightly as he asked, "Mr. Nanming, I'm sure the treasure refined from this thing won't be inferior to the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence, right?" The Nanming Patriarch walked forward and formed a strange and special complicated hand seal. He brewed a spell and cast it into the black platform. After examining it closely for a while, he said in astonishment and excitement, "It's really good stuff. It's 10 times stronger than the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence. It's such a waste to use such a good thing as a base." Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately lit up, and he said, "Then how about we refine it into a treasure?" The Ape King's eyes also lit up, but when he saw the inspection spell cast by the Nanming Patriarch, his eyes lit up as well. It's naturally good to be able to refine it into a treasure, but it's a pity. Grandmaster Nanming shook his head slightly and sighed. "It's a pity that my cultivation base is a little low, so it's hard for me to add formations to it when I'm refining it. If I'm not careful, it'll be ruined." The biggest problem was that it was just as Yuan Hong had said. Casting it was truly difficult. Even if one used a special method, it would take more than 10 years to refine a single treasure. Time is secondary, the main thing is, it's just too difficult. If your cultivation is raised to the immortal stage, can you add an array formation in here when you're refining? Yu Qianqiu asked. Patriarch Nanming was stunned. He then nodded and said, "If I can raise my cultivation to the celestial realm, it shouldn't be a big problem with my comprehension over the years. But how can it be so easy to raise my cultivation to the celestial realm?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and stopped arguing about this problem. He then asked, "Then if I help you cast the item you want to refine first, the time needed to refine it should be greatly reduced, right?" When he said this, the Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King's eyes lit up at the same time. They both recalled his miraculous method just now. This matter was probably not a problem for him at all. The Nanming Patriarch clapped his hands and shouted, "This is the biggest problem. If you can cast it first, it'll greatly reduce the time needed to refine it. I can guarantee that you'll be able to refine a set of treasures in 10 days. However, after his excitement, his expression darkened again. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "But I'll say the ugly words first. With my current cultivation base, my control is not stable at all. There's still a high chance that it'll be ruined. Ha! The heavens are really on my side." Yu Qianqiu suddenly laughed maniacally when he heard this. He then cupped his hands at the Nanming Patriarch and said, "Senior Nanming, I'll solve all the problems. You just need to help me refine a batch of treasures with this item. How about it?" "Really?" As soon as the Nanming Patriarch said this, he felt that it was a little inappropriate. He looked at the Ape King and said, "Yuan Hong, this is yours. I'll have to ask for your permission first." Yu Qianqiu immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at Yuan Hong. If he dared to stop him, then don't blame him for being impolite. Disciple will listen to master's arrangements. But disciple has a request. The Ape King bowed a little nervously and said, "Disciple only asks that when master refines the treasures, disciple can be allowed to learn by the side. Even if it's to be an assistant to gain experience, it's fine." After he finished speaking, he did not dare to raise his head. Although he was now the disciple of the Nanming Patriarch, he was used to ruling over this area and being the overlord. It could be said that bad habits were hard to change. Otherwise, why would a disciple raise conditions to their master? But this was already a very big change. It would probably take some time to settle everything in one go. At the very least, he had to wait until the Nanming Patriarch revealed his methods of refining treasures and convinced him wholeheartedly. Otherwise, it was very possible that he would kill the Nanming Patriarch, his master, in a fit of unhappiness. After all, the ethics within the ruins of God could not be compared to the outside world. It was inevitable that the dignified ape king would have some wild nature and temper. Of course, the main reason why he was nervous when he said this was because Yu Qianzhou was by his side. The key was that the methods that Yu Qianzhou had revealed were too intimidating, so he could not help but be afraid. As expected, when Yu Qianzhou heard this, he snorted coldly and said, "Yuan Hong, I've given you some face, but you still want to take advantage of me. Do you believe that I'll teach you a lesson right now? I'm warning you, if anything happens to Mr. Nanming here, I'll immediately make sure that not a single living thing can be found in this flaming mountain, starting from you." The Ape King was speechless. When this guy had just arrived, he was still acting like he was close with his brother. Why did he suddenly turn hostile now? He could not help but look at the Nanming Patriarch with a pleading look. The Nanming Patriarch immediately waved his hand at Yu Qianzhou, indicating that he should stop talking. He said to the Ape King, "Since you've acknowledged me as your master, I'll naturally teach you what I should teach you. However, I don't want to hear about this bargaining a second time. Otherwise, our relationship as master and disciple will end here. I'll forget about it this time. I'm refining treasures here, so naturally, I need someone to help me. You can start learning from me." "Thank you, master." The Ape King bowed excitedly. Yu Qianzhou immediately walked over and patted his shoulder. He said with a smile, "That's right. As a disciple, you should act like a disciple. Otherwise, what's the point of being a disciple? Don't you think so?" He could turn hostile and laugh whenever he wanted, but a straightforward person like the Ape King could not get used to it. He could only cup his hands awkwardly and said, "I've learned something." Actually, as long as he did not do anything out of line, Yu Qianzhou did not plan to do anything to him. He was just trying to scare him just now so that he would have some scruples in his heart. This was also to save him trouble in the future. Since the matter was over, Yu Qianzhou no longer pestered him. He immediately took out a great restriction-breaking pill, a marrow-cleansing pill, and an immortal ascension pill. He pulled the Nanming Patriarch over and explained how to use them and the symptoms that would appear. Finally, he stuffed them into the Nanming Patriarch's hand. Is this real?" The Nanming Patriarch looked at the pill in his hand in disbelief. The Ape King did not think that what Yu Qianzhou said was a lie. Instead, he became even more wary of Yu Qianzhou. "My character is famous for being good. You don't believe others, but you don't believe me? Don't worry and take it. Just deal with it according to what I say." Yu Qianzhou urged him to start quickly and not waste time. Old ancestor Nanming was both excited and skeptical. If Yu Qianzhou didn't praise his character, he would have directly consumed it. But once Yu Qianzhou praised his character, he immediately became a little timid. Others did not know, but he had been with Nongzhu for a long time. He often heard Nongzhu talk about the dirty things that Yu Qianzhou had done. The Yu Qianzhou in Nongzhu's mouth could be said to be a person who did all kinds of good and bad things. It would be strange if the Nanming Patriarch was not afraid. However, when he thought about it, Yu Qianzhou did not have the intention to harm him. With his current cultivation, if he wanted to harm him, he could do it directly. There was no need to go around in such a big circle. In addition, with Yu Qianzhou's unceasing urging, the Nanming Patriarch gritted his teeth and walked to the center of the dark platform. He sat down cross-legged and took the limit-breaking pill. The facts proved that Yu Qianzhou did not lie to him. When his cultivation successfully broke through to the final stage of soul formation with the help of the Spirit Stone, the Nanming Patriarch was immediately excited. He did not expect that he would break through the shackles that he had not broken through for so many years in one go. Of course, he had just taken a limit-breaking pill, so the toxins in his body were not heavy. Thus, he did not suffer much. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would really doubt Yu Qianzhou's intentions. The Ape King saw with his own eyes that his master's cultivation broke through just like that. The shock in his heart could be imagined. The Nanming Patriarch had no more scruples now. Without the urging of Yu Qianzhou, he quickly swallowed the marrow-cleansing pill. After tossing and turning his body black, the Immortal Ascension pill was stuffed into his mouth like candy. However, he suffered a little this time. However, Yu Qianzhou had already told him in advance, and he was already mentally prepared. He gritted his teeth and finally endured it. His cultivation successfully stepped into the early stage of minor immortal. This is real. I really stepped into the immortal realm? The Nanming Patriarch checked the changes in his body. He still could not believe it. He felt like he was dreaming. Did he really break through to the immortal realm that he dreamed of so easily? At the side, the Ape King looked at Yu Qianzhou as if he was looking at a god. He muttered in his heart, if I get on good terms with him, will he be able to help me improve my cultivation? All right. Stop dreaming. Put on your clothes first. After I help you forge an immortal body, you will be considered to have truly stepped into the ranks of immortal cultivators. It's still too early to be happy. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand as if he was used to this scene. Looking at the old man's naked body was really boring. The Nanming Patriarch was a little too excited. He no longer cared about being shy. After putting on his clothes, he obediently stood beside Yu Qianzhou and waited for instructions. In the past, he had never been so obedient in front of Bai Changchun. Yu Qianzhou also wanted to hurry up and get things done. He had too many things on hand and had no time to waste. Thus, he led the Nanming Patriarch outside and the two of them flew to the peak of Flaming Mountain. How could the Ape King let go of such an opportunity to broaden his horizons? He braced himself and followed them. After Yu Qianzhou told the Nanming Patriarch some things to take note of, he glanced at the Ape King who was standing nearby and watching weakly. He secretly pinched the purple flames in each of his palms and placed them on his back. He stood on the peak of the mountain with the demeanor of a grandmaster. Facing the heaven and earth, he shouted, "There is righteousness in the heaven and earth. Wind, fire, thunder, and lightning, listen to my command." Chapter 948. Why did these words sound so familiar? In fact, it was half-baked. Upon hearing this, Ancestor Nanming, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, pondered for a moment and immediately became spirited. Especially the opening line, "Heaven and earth have righteousness." Wasn't this the mantra of Bai Changchun's starting gesture? As expected of Bai Changchun's disciple, it was Bai Changchun's personal great technique. Now he could rest assured. Ancestor Nanming's nervous heart calmed down. He had misgivings about Yu Qianzhou's character, but he still had confidence in the ability that Bai Changchun had taught him. That old fellow who had fought against heaven and earth and presided over the demon domain for 1,000 years was not just any ordinary person. He could be said to be a peerless genius. Now that things had come to this, he was the first to comfort himself. Little did he know that the skill that Yu Qianzhou was using now had nothing to do with his master, Bai Changchun. He just wanted to take the opportunity to intimidate the Ape King, which could be considered as giving his hero army an extra layer of protection in the divine ruin realm. However, this guy wanted to make himself more majestic and wondered if he should say something to increase his momentum. After thinking about it, he still felt that the old man's style was the most domineering. Every word and action was sparkling. Thus, he conveniently adapted and borrowed it, but in terms of momentum, he was still a little inferior to his master. One was putting on an act, while the other was communicating with the mantra of heaven and earth. At least in terms of tone, he lacked that kind of confidence that was deep in his bones. Putting on an act was just putting on an act. In fact, how could the little tricks of demons and monsters be compared to the majesty of true righteousness? There was no comparison at all. However, coupled with his follow-up methods, it was enough to scare people. Heaven and earth have righteousness, wind, fire, thunder, and lightning listen to my command, wind rises and clouds surge. The ape king's brain turned to reflect on the meaning of this sentence. He thought to himself, what a big tone. Isn't he afraid of losing his tongue? Using thunder and lightning to cast a body? Let's see how you can create thunder and lightning in a clear sky. Just as he turned his head to look at the clear sky, a gust of wind suddenly blew over. The black smoke coming out of the cave in the middle of the mountain was immediately blown into a blur. His fiery red long hair was also blown around by the strong wind, causing it to dance wildly in the wind. It's really windy? The ape king was slightly startled. Suddenly, he saw that the clear sky was gradually turning gray and hazy. He did not know if it was because of the billowing black smoke that was being blown away behind him. However, the gradually darkening sky told him the answer. Rolling dark clouds gradually gathered in the sky. When the dark clouds shrouded the entire sky, the world became dark and oppressive. Rumble. A dull and shocking thunder rumbled in the dark clouds. Even through the dark clouds, the thunder still shone brightly on the vast land. Although Ancestor Nanming and the Ape King had vaguely guessed what was going to happen next, they were still shocked when they saw the wind, clouds, and rolling thunder appear out of nowhere. Could it be that the wind, fire, thunder, and lightning in the world really listened to him? Ancestor Nanming suddenly looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had the demeanor of a grandmaster and was facing heaven and earth with his hands clasped behind his back. He could not help but sigh inwardly. He is indeed Bai Changchun's disciple and the punishment envoy of the demon region. I wonder how high his cultivation is now. Kacha. A bolt of lightning descended from the dark clouds and descended on the vast land. It was a vast expanse of green in front of him, which immediately pulled Ancestor Nanming's attention back. He looked up and saw that the dark clouds were already filled with electric snakes, and the image of thunder and lightning was ready to strike. The violent wind blew endlessly, causing the clothes of the three of them to flutter loudly. The Ape King looked at the scene of heaven and earth changing color and instantly felt that he was so small under the power of heaven and earth. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him away without a trace. Mr. Nanming, it's about to begin. Get ready. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the Ape King as he said this. If it was not for the sake of intimidating this fellow, there was no need to make such a big commotion. In fact, he was now very familiar with the control of thunder and lightning. He did not need to make a big scene to help Ancestor Nanming cast his body. All right. All right. Ancestor Nanming's voice was a little shaky. How could he know that Yu Qianqiu made such a big scene just to watch? The thunderbolt was aimed at him. It was too frightening. He was trembling with fear as he guessed whether he could withstand it or not. Brat, you better not fail. There was no time for him to think too much. Rumble. A bolt of lightning had already drilled out of the dark clouds and instantly struck his body. Sizzle, sizzle. Rings of electricity flowed up and down his body, which was sitting cross-legged. Ancestor Nanming's mind was blank at first. When he recovered, he realized that Yu Qianqiu had perfect control of the power of thunder and lightning. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and began to improve his body according to Yu Qianqiu's instructions. He could really control thunder and lightning. The Ape King stared at the bolt of lightning that connected heaven and earth in bewilderment. It hung between heaven and earth and kept sizzling and twisting, not disappearing. This scene made his mind go blank as well, as if the lightning had struck him. When he slowly came back to his senses, he felt that the unparalleled power of heaven and earth could actually be controlled by someone. He looked at Yu Qianzhou with eyes full of reverence. When the bolt of lightning that connected heaven and earth retracted back into the sky, the sound of thunder in the dark clouds gradually subsided. The lightning disappeared and the dark clouds also began to dissipate rapidly. In a short while, the blue sky was once again supported by the sun. Everything was like a dream or an illusion. The Ape King, who had witnessed this scene with his own eyes, dared not believe that it was real. However, in front of him, the naked master Nan Ming stood up slowly. He was laughing wildly with his arms wide open. This had already explained everything. Otherwise, not many old fellows would be so excited to the point of being so shameless and frank. He had forgotten himself. "I say, old fellow, don't you think you should put on your clothes?" It was truly unsightly. Yu Qianzhou tilted his head to look at the horizon and sneered, "You dare to compete with heaven and earth whose bird is bigger? You're the only one in the 3 realms. Aren't you afraid of heaven's wrath?" Nan Ming ancestor's neck tightened as if someone was choking him. He hurriedly took out his clothes and put them on. The awkwardness was just a fleeting moment for him. Compared to his cultivation reaching the immortal realm and successfully forging an immortal body, everything else was just fleeting clouds. Now, he could live forever. That. Yu Qianzhou, everything is ready now. What treasure do you want to refine? We can start working now. Nan Ming ancestor moved to Yu Qianzhou's side and smiled awkwardly. In his entire life, it was people who begged him to refine treasures. This was the first time he took the initiative to ask for permission. Even Bai Changchun did not enjoy such treatment when he was in his hands. However, who asked him to receive such a great benefit from others? It would be inexcusable if he did not express his gratitude. Under their gazes, Yu Qianzhou muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Go and make your preparations. I'll decide what I want to refine when I return." With the combination of strength and gentleness, he had already subdued both master and disciple. Since he had put in so much effort, it was only natural that he would receive something in return. His tone of voice already carried a hint of ordering his subordinates around. With these words, he transformed into a stream of light and swiftly flew into the distance. In the valley within the misty sea of fog, after Zhang Peng sent his men to investigate the surrounding terrain, he quickly arranged for the army to construct appropriate fortifications on the spot. Bunkers and hidden sentry posts radiated out from the valley in all directions. Inside the valley, Yu Qianzhou and Zhang Peng, the master and disciple duo, gathered a few others together. They kept using the soil to conduct some sort of experiment. After they were done, Zhang Peng quickly led them away. After Yu Qianzhou made a few rounds around the enormous underground works in the valley, Zhang Pengfang returned with a few jade archives and handed them to him. Yu Qianzhou then left after leaving some instructions to Zhang Pengfang. Zhang Pengfang had no idea what he was up to. With the jade archives in hand, Yu Qianzhou excitedly rushed back to Mount Great Flaming. When he barged into the cave and saw the master and disciple from Nanming, he waved the jade archives in his hand and said, "Let's get to work. Let's get to work." He put away the jade archives and leaped onto the huge, pitch-black platform. Grandmaster Nanming flashed to his side and asked curiously, "What kind of treasure are you planning to refine?" Yu Qianzhou sized up the size of the huge, pitch-black platform, then asked, "I want to refine a batch of armor. What do you think? Using the extraterrestrial metal to refine armor?" Grandmaster Nanming was stunned. "Isn't that too much of a waste? Normal armor won't do. With you around, can't you refine them all into treasures?" As Yu Qianzhou spoke, he was suddenly stunned. He looked at Grandmaster Nanming and smiled. "Extraterrestrial metal? Looks like you've already come up with a name for this item. It's a good name. Let's call the refined armor the extraterrestrial metal armor." Grandmaster Nanming was speechless. What was he talking about? Nan Ming, I've already thought of the appearance of the extraterrestrial metal armor. What do you think? Yu Qianzhou said to himself as he took a few steps back. He slowly opened his arms, and the pupils of Grandmaster Nan Ming and Ape King suddenly shrank. They saw that the huge, pitch-black platform suddenly seemed to come alive. Like a group of black ants, they climbed up from under Yu Qianzhou's feet and quickly covered Yu Qianzhou's entire body. A Yu Qianzhou wearing armor with only a pair of eyes revealed stood in front of the master and disciple. That wasn't the end of it. The armor continued to change its outer shape. Small and sharp spikes that were about 1 centimeter long covered the surface of the armor. Especially on the shoulders, there were 3 1-inch spikes in a triangular shape. There were also 1-inch spikes on the elbows and the backs of the palms, knees, and soles of the feet. There was even a long sword on his back. The entire armor looked abnormally ferocious and evil. Dang! 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 Yu Qianzhou walked a few steps in the armor. He scolded in a low, muffled voice through the dozens of small holes on his mouth that almost covered his entire face. Damn it, the extraterrestrial metal is indeed a little too heavy. I can't kill others like this, and I'm so clumsy that I can only wait for others to kill me. Then, he turned his head and looked at Grandmaster Nan Ming. Nan Ming, what do you think is the most suitable thickness? Grandmaster Nan Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he walked in front of him. He looked at the thickness of the armor around his eyes and found that it was at least 1 centimeter thick. He said weakly, "It's too thick. In addition to the spikes all over your body, it would be strange if it wasn't heavy. Let's reduce it by 90%. Chapter 949. 90% thinner? Yu Qianzhou was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He shrieked, then isn't it only 1 millimeter thick? It's too thin, too thin. No, it can't block anything. Can that still be considered armor? If it wasn't for the weight, I'd think it's too thin for 1 centimeter. 1 millimeter isn't thin. Nan Ming Patriarch tried his best to explain, don't forget what this is. This is the metal essence from beyond the heavens. With just this 1 millimeter thickness, even if you let Yuan Hong use all of his strength, he wouldn't be able to break through it. If it wasn't for the fact that we have to add a formation to it and that we need a certain thickness when refining it again, I think it'd be better to make it thinner. If someone's cultivation is so high that they can break through the metal essence from beyond the heavens, it'd be useless even if you add another meter. They can still break through it. Moreover, after adding a formation inside, its defense will be greatly increased. What you said makes sense. As he spoke, the armor on his body retreated like the tide, merging back into the large black platform beneath his feet. Yu Qianzhou waved the remaining thin piece in his hand and said, "Wait for me, I'll be back soon." He rushed out of the belly of the mountain. He had to find someone to test whether this 1 millimeter thickness was solid or not. The master and disciple looked at each other, not knowing what he was going to do. Suddenly, Nan Ming Patriarch noticed that Ape King's forehead was drenched in sweat. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong with you?" Ape King wiped his sweat and stared at the black platform in a daze. He then asked with lingering fear, "Master, just how high is his cultivation?" He was truly frightened by Yu Qianzhou's methods. He had used 50,000 years to accumulate the metal essence from beyond the heavens in the belly of the mountain. Now that he saw Yu Qianzhou using it as if it was a toy, it was no different from having a nightmare. "You're asking me?" Nan Ming Patriarch shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Who should I ask? I don't know what level his cultivation has reached, but in short, he can't be predicted with common sense. He's a monster." On the 22nd floor of the World Chamber of Commerce, a door opened and Yu Qianzhou rushed out. He flew to the side of Wei Chuanqiu, who was sitting cross-legged at the door. He first glanced inside the door, then casually set up a soundproof barrier. Holding the thin piece of extraterrestrial metal essence armor plate that was only 1 millimeter thick, he waved it in front of Wei Chuanxiu, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, and said, "Bat King Wei, look what I've brought you." Wei Chuanxiu opened her eyes without hesitation. She stared blankly at the black object in front of her for a while. Then, she stood up and asked suspiciously, "Why are you so kind as to give me something good? Isn't it just a piece of broken metal? What good is this?" He. You don't know this. It took me a lot of effort to get this thing." Yu Qianzhou smiled sinisterly as he waved the thing in his hand and said, "This is called extraterrestrial metal essence. Don't be fooled by its small size, but its defense is amazing. I can guarantee that even if you use all your cultivation, you won't be able to break it." "Are you serious? It's really as powerful as you say?" Wei Chuanxiu's eyes lit up. She was instantly intrigued by Yu Qianzhou and was about to reach out to take a look. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianzhou hid it behind him and said with a smile, "Since you don't believe me, let's make a bet." Wei Chuanxiu immediately became alert and sneered, "What bet? I think you're up to no good again. What extraterrestrial metal essence? I've never heard of it. It's just a piece of broken metal. You can give it to me if you want, but I don't care. Look at you. I told you that you don't believe me. If this is considered a piece of broken metal, then there's nothing good in this world." Yu Qianzhou took out the piece of metal from behind him with a look of disdain and sighed, "How about this? In order to verify that this piece of metal you said is really indestructible, let's make a bet. If you can't break it, then I'm sorry. I'll take it back and not give it to you. If you can break it, then I'll give it to you." Really indestructible? Wei Chuanxiu thought that whether she gave it to him or not, there was no loss to her. She took the thing in her hand and flicked it with her finger. In the end, she found that it was really not an ordinary thing. Her eyes lit up again and she immediately became spirited. "How is it? I didn't lie to you, did I?" Yu Qianzhou urged, "Quickly try it and see if you can break it." With a dang sound, Wei Chuanxiu's finger touched it with a green light. Then they put their heads together and looked at it. There was no mark on it at all. Wei Chuanxiu immediately exclaimed, and then a series of green light poked on the broken piece of metal. After a series of dang 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 sounds, there were some slight scratches on it, but it was far from being damaged. Such a thin thing was actually so indestructible. Wei Chuanxiu immediately clicked her tongue and said in surprise, "It's really a good thing." "Of course." Yu Qianzhou was delighted, but he didn't forget to ask, "Old bat, is that all you can do? Have you used all your cultivation? Just a little more. If you can't break it, I'll take it back. Why are you in such a hurry?" Wei Chuanxiu rolled her eyes, then she mustered up her strength and poked the piece of metal for a while. However, only some slight scratches were left, which was really incredible. Wei Chuanxiu was still unwilling to give up. He held the two sides of the piece of metal and used all his strength to pry it open. "This thing is called extraterrestrial metal essence, right? Where did you get it? I really can't use my hands and feet here. It looks like I have to find a secluded place to attack it. Otherwise, it'll be really hard to break it open. This is a good thing. It can't be better to refine it into a treasure." The piece of metal showed signs of bending when he used so much strength, but once he relaxed, it immediately returned to its original shape. All right. Stop for a while." Yu Qianzhou took the thing from his hand and put it away, saying, "Look at how strenuous you are. It'll be a waste if you continue." He turned around and left. He was satisfied that the experiment had reached this stage. Even Wei Bat King couldn't break it with his cultivation, so there was nothing more to say. If he let Elder Nanming refine it a little more, its defense would probably be even stronger. "It's fine as long as I know what I'm doing. I'll try again when the armor is done." "Yu Qianzhou, don't go. I haven't used my full strength yet. I'll try again, Wei Chuanxiu shouted from behind. He was prepared to trick Yu Qianzhou into giving him such a good thing. Unfortunately, Yu Qianzhou didn't fall for his trick at all. Even if you're as treacherous as a ghost, you still have to drink the water I wash my feet with. Yu Qianzhou turned around and chuckled. He waved his hand at Wei Chuanxiu and went into one of the rooms. Wei Chuanxiu looked at the guarded door behind him and thought for a while before sitting down cross-legged. However, just as he closed his eyes, he suddenly opened them again. In a flash, he chased after the room that Yu Qianzhou had gone into. In the end, he discovered that Yu Qianzhou had already disappeared. He immediately gritted his teeth. Only after he calmed down did he realize that he had been tricked by Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou had gone around in circles and didn't know how to react. He couldn't understand why he would be so stupid as to make such a bet with Yu Qianzhou. If the item couldn't be broken, it wouldn't be given to him. If it was broken, it would be given to him. Wouldn't he be at a disadvantage regardless of whether he won or lost? If things could be broken, why would he want a broken item? Is this kid too free? Why did he come here to play this game? Wei Chuanxiu thought about it and found it strange. There didn't seem to be any benefits for Yu Qianzhou to make this bet. However, what he didn't know was that Yu Qianzhou was purely using him as an experiment. What would he think if he found out? In the belly of the great flaming mountain, Yu Qianzhou had already put on his armor again. After experimenting, he listened to Patriarch Nan Ming's suggestion and reduced the armor's thickness by 90%. Naturally, the weight was reduced by a lot. Then, under Patriarch Nan Ming's suggestion, he wore the armor and performed various body movements. The spikes that hindered the flexibility of his joints were all removed. The spikes on the inner parts of his limbs and the spikes that hindered the bending of certain parts of his body were all removed. As a result, the weight was greatly reduced. Finally, he made adjustments to the armor to make it more comfortable and human-like, so that it could be quickly put on and taken off at any time. After the weight was reduced, Yu Qianzhou pulled out the long sword on his back. He swung the sword around and flew a few rounds in the belly of the mountain before landing in front of Patriarch Nan Ming. He smiled and said, "Please help me refine this sword as well. Not only will this set of equipment have an indestructible defense, it will also have an unstoppable attack power. Please." As he said this, he sheathed the long sword on his back and took off the armor on his body. Patriarch Nan Ming smiled bitterly as he received the armor. He sighed and said, "I will do my best." What are you doing?" In a flash, Yu Qianzhou returned to the pitch-black platform. He took out a few jade archives, held them in his hands, and closed his eyes. The jade archives recorded the detailed data of the nearly 10,000 members of the hero army. The reason he had sought out Zhang Peng and the rest for this very moment. After a while, several hundred sets of armor slowly floated up from the large platform, surrounding Yu Qianzhou. None of the armor was empty. The parts that revealed their eye sockets were empty, but each of them stood straight with a long sword slung on their back. In addition, the uniform design of the armor made them look ferocious and terrifying. One couldn't help but suspect that they were ghostly soldiers of the netherworld who had crawled out from the ground. Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes, took out a storage bracelet, and wore it on his wrist. He stored the several hundred sets of armor inside. This was only the first batch. Immediately after, several dozen batches of similar ferocious empty armors appeared on the pitch-black platform. In total, nearly 10,000 sets of ferocious empty armors were all stored inside the storage bracelet. After preparing all the sets of the hero army, Yu Qianzhou stopped. The 4-meter-thick platform beneath his feet was now only slightly more than a meter thick. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou took off the storage bracelet in his hand and took out an empty storage bracelet. He then walked towards the dumbfounded Patriarch Nan Ming. Chapter 950. Looking at the approaching Yu Qianzhou, Patriarch Nan Ming asked in a panic, Yu Qianzhou, what are you doing? He really didn't expect Yu Qianzhou's so-called batch to be so big. It was too scary. Yu Qianzhou handed over the 2 storage bracelets in his hand and said with a smile, you taught Yuan Hong the crafting skills, so you have to let him practice. Just take these things as practice for Yuan Hong. As he said that, he looked at Yuan Hong and asked, Yuan Hong, what do you think? If it's not enough, I'll make more. Yuan Hong recovered from the shock of the appearance of the large number of armors and looked at Patriarch Nan Ming with surprise and joy. Patriarch Nan Ming waved his hand and said, no need, I don't need so much. Senior Nan Ming. Yu Qianzhou's expression turned solemn and he sent a voice transmission word by word, do you really think that these things are for your disciple to practice with? I don't mind telling you the truth. In this Ruins of God, I have already selected a large number of reliable candidates from the human world to train here. I helped all of them raise their cultivation to the immortal realm like you. In order for us human cultivators to have a foothold in the immortal realm, they are ready to sacrifice themselves at any time. Although they all have the determination to die, we can't just watch them go through fire and water. We have to do our best to give them the greatest guarantee of safety. This is the reason why I asked you to refine this batch of armors. Do you really have the heart to refuse? Patriarch Nan Ming wanted to say that it had nothing to do with him, but he had received a great favor from him before, so it was really hard for him to directly reject it. After a pause, he replied with a voice transmission, Yu Qianzhou, you are making things difficult for me. If I didn't see wrongly, this batch of armors is probably close to 10,000 sets. Even if I want to help you, I can't. The number is too large, it's beyond my ability. I'm not worried about this. With Senior Nan Ming's crafting skills, I'm sure you can find a suitable solution. Besides, I don't need it right away. I still have some time for you to prepare. Also, I won't let you work for nothing. Yu Qianzhou asked through voice transmission, I wonder if Senior Nan Ming is interested in completing your ancestors' unfulfilled wish and regaining control of the mythical Fire Palace, the #1 artificer sect in the immortal world? Not interested. Ancestor Nan Ming vetoed him flatly. After thinking for a while, he sighed and said, Yu Qianzhou, you don't have to waste your efforts to tempt me. I'll agree to it. Just treat it as returning the favor. However, I have to make this clear. I can only promise that I will do my best. As for whether I can satisfy your needs or not, that's not a guarantee. Zhang Xian took the storage bracelet from the other party's hand and wore it on his left and right wrists. As long as he agreed. Yu Qianzhou smiled and nodded. He didn't force it anymore. As the saying goes, there will always be a way when the time comes. When the time comes, there will naturally be a way. After a long conversation between the two of them, Yu Qianzhou arranged everything that needed to be arranged in the Ruins of God and left without any worries for the time being. In the following journey, he went back and forth between the human world and Utopia to deal with the matter of gathering people to refine pills. Now that he had the final say in the entire human world, there was almost no resistance when it came to matters in the human world. After returning to the World Chamber of Commerce, he was immediately questioned by Wei Chunxiu. However, Yu Qianzhou had a way to get away. He only said that he had an appointment to discuss the matter regarding the Demon Core. Although Wei Chunxiu was clamoring, she had no temper and could only let him leave. In the eyes of outsiders, the business of the World Chamber of Commerce was still miserable. Yu Qianzhou walked around the deserted hall downstairs a few times and found that there was not a single customer. He didn't think much of it, but when Jing Yuankong heard that he was here, he quickly found him in the hall and said bluntly, it's fine if the business is a little lacking, but it's not good if the business is broken. No matter what, we have to keep it going. Otherwise, it'll be too weird if we don't do anything in the psychedelic immortal city. Yu Qianzhou thought that it made sense. He casually placed some immortal herbs for Jing Yuankong to arrange, looked around and asked, where did Yunnan Tian go? He should still be wandering around the psychedelic immortal city gathering information. He should be back a little later. Jing Yuankong looked outside the door and asked, should I call him over? No need, go do what you need to do. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and walked straight out of the World Chamber of Commerce. Jing Yuankong smiled bitterly. He couldn't think of anything to be busy about. The Wangu Tong branch was bustling with people. Compared to the World Chamber of Commerce, the difference was like heaven and earth. After hearing that Yu Qianzhou had arrived, Wang Gui personally came out to welcome him. The two of them sat down in the back hall. I don't see Miss Wan Ling. Could she have returned to Myriad Saint's palace? Yu Qianzhou looked around and asked casually. He. She went to watch the ranking conference. Wang Gui smiled and said, did Sect Master Yu come here specially to find her? I can think of a way to contact her and get her to come back as soon as possible. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Even though his World Chamber of Commerce didn't go to the ranking conference, he wanted to go and broaden his horizons. Unfortunately, Heartless Palace kept a close eye on him. It really wasn't convenient for him to run around. Regretfully, he shook his head and said, that's not necessary. I'm here to ask how the purchase of beast cores is going. Wei Chuanxiu couldn't keep fooling around. Since he came up with this excuse, he had to bring something back to report. That was why he came here. I've already purchased more than 500 and was about to send it to World Chamber of Commerce. I didn't expect Sect Master Yu to grace us with your presence. Wang Gui took out a storage bag and handed it to Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou injected his divine sense into it and put it away. He was about to leave when Wang Gui, who had been observing him, interrupted first and said, I wonder what gift Sect Master Yu has prepared for Immortal Emperor. Gift? Yu Qianzhou was stunned and asked suspiciously, why would you give a gift out of the blue? Doesn't Sect Master Yu know? Wang Gui said strangely, Immortal Palace will hold a grand wedding ceremony for Immortal Emperor and Immortal Monarch Ji Wu in a year. No, I should call her Immortal Empress now. Immortal Palace will hold a grand wedding ceremony for Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress Ji Wu in a year. A few days ago, Immortal Palace announced to the entire immortal world that they will invite all the sect masters of the immortal world to gather at Immortal Palace to congratulate them. After saying that, he observed Yu Qianzhou's expression and was slightly puzzled. However, Yu Qianzhou really didn't know about this. To be exact, he didn't have time to know about it. After hearing Wang Gui's words, he couldn't help but be a little absent-minded. He didn't know if Immortal Crocodile Monarch had leaked the matter of him touching Ji Wu's butt. If one day, Immortal Emperor Jin Tai heard about it, then he would be doomed. At least, he would have no place in the immortal world. Oh. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and said perfunctorily, this matter. See, I almost forgot about it. Sigh. I have a headache thinking about the gift for Immortal Emperor. I don't know what to give. Keep pretending. How could you forget about such a big thing? You are clearly from the Immortal Palace. It doesn't matter if you give a gift or not, so I didn't take it to heart at all. Wang Gui probed a little and smiled, thinking he knew what was going on. That's true. The Immortal Emperor's wedding is not an ordinary wedding. He is the supreme of the immortal world. I really have to think about the gift. Just as the two were talking about the wedding of the Immortal Emperor and Ji Wu, one of the parties involved was helpless. The Immortal Palace shone brightly in the sky, and below it was the dazzling Crystal Palace. In the courtyard, Lu Yanqing carefully accompanied Ji Wu, but Ji Wu looked up at the Immortal Palace floating in the auspicious clouds with a frown. At first, the Immortal Emperor gave her a 1-month deadline to consider the marriage. After the 1-month deadline, the Immortal Emperor came again to interrogate her. Ji Wu naturally found an excuse to refuse. However, as Yi Xuejun expected, the Immortal Emperor really lost his patience and took a hard approach. But to Yi Xuejun's surprise, the immortal emperor captured him on the spot and used him to threaten Ji Wu. He once again gave Ji Wu a deadline to think about it. The consequences of refusing again, the immortal emperor's actions were clear. Yi Xuejun would be the first to suffer. After some consideration, Ji Wu had no choice. She also knew that she could not escape the immortal emperor's control. Most importantly, why should Yi Xuejun be implicated? She had no choice but to agree to the immortal emperor. However, she still held a glimmer of hope and made a final effort to delay. She could marry, but she had to have a year to adjust her emotions. Otherwise, she would not be able to accept the reality of being forced. At this point, the immortal emperor naturally had no reason to force her. Besides, for him, what was the difference between a year and a snap of the fingers? So he agreed to Ji Wu and ordered people to send a message to the entire immortal world on the spot. This was to force Ji Wu to have no room to regret. However, a few days passed, and Ji Wu still did not see Yi Xuejun being released. She could not help but wonder if Yi Xuejun had been killed. Today, she had made up her mind. If she did not see Yi Xuejun return, she would not hesitate to break into the immortal palace and fall out with immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Lu Yanqing stood quietly behind Ji Wu. Her mood had not completely calmed down. Even in her wildest dreams, she didn't expect that her sudden decision would cause her to witness something unimaginable. She was by Ji Wu's side and witnessed the entire process of immortal Emperor Jin Tai's forced marriage. She didn't expect that these high and mighty characters, who were rarely seen by ordinary people, would have such a face. Immortal. Immortal Empress, let me play the guqin for you. Lu Yanqing said behind Ji Wu. Ever since she was brought here, Ji Wu would ask her to play and sing almost every day. However, since Yi Xuejun was taken away, she did not ask for it anymore. Immortal Empress? Don't mention this in front of me in the future. Ji Wu looked at the sky with some confusion and murmured, Lu Yanqing, Lingfang Valley must be beautiful. Lu Yanqing responded subconsciously, then her whole body shook. She suddenly looked up at Ji Wu's back in horror. How did she know about Lingfang Valley? Chapter 951. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Lu Yanqing's mind. Although her way of doing things was different from others, it did not mean that she was not smart. One thing she was sure of was that Ji Wu definitely did not guess the name of Lingfang Valley blindly, and it was impossible for her to guess it so accurately. Moreover, she even asked the owner of Lingfang Valley. Obviously, Ji Wu wanted her here because she already knew about her relationship with Lingfang Valley. Did she also know that the world commerce's people were smuggled from the human world? Was she the only one who knew about this? Or did others also know about this? Or perhaps she was just testing me, but I actually responded just now. Oh my God! What did I do? Thinking that once these secrets were leaked, the entire world commerce's people would suffer, Lu Yanqing could not help but turn pale with fright, and her delicate body broke out in a cold sweat. Unfortunately, she could not recognize that the person who followed Yu Qianzhou in Lingfang Valley was Yi Xuejun, who had been captured by the immortal emperor. Otherwise, she could more or less guess something, and would not be as clueless as she was now. However, Yi Xuejun's hair was full of small braids, and he was purely dressed as a tribal savage. Even his skin color had been specially changed. He was a completely different person from now, so how could she easily recognize him? She did not know when, but Ji Wu had turned to look at her and asked, "Are you afraid? Are you afraid of something else, or are you afraid that I will reveal your secret? I don't understand what immortal monarch is talking about." Lu Yanqing replied nervously, her heart in turmoil. At this time, she suddenly thought of Yu Qianzhou. She believed that if Yu Qianzhou was here, he would definitely have a way to deal with such a matter properly. She instantly understood Yu Qianzhou's ruthlessness. If it was Yu Qianzhou, based on Yu Qianzhou's character, the first thing he would think of was to silence them. She suddenly understood something. Sometimes, if one was not ruthless and decisive, the consequences of the situation would be very terrifying. The lives of many people would be implicated in it. However, these thoughts only flashed through her mind. Some things that were deeply engraved in her heart could not be changed. Not to mention that she did not have the ability to silence Ji Wu. Even if she had the ability, she still could not do it. Don't you understand what I'm saying? Ji Wu's cold face revealed a slight smile. She stared at Lu Yen and said, "Why are your eyes evasive? Why don't you look at me like you usually do?" "That's because you have a guilty conscience. You're not a liar at all, so why force yourself?" Lu Yanqing was indeed a person who did not know how to lie, but that was only because of the environment she had grown up in. Now that she thought of the serious consequences she would face, she had no choice but to bite the bullet. She lowered her head slightly and tried her best to keep her voice calm. "I really don't understand what the immortal monarch is saying." "Do you really not understand?" Ji Wu walked over to Lu Yanqing, who had her head down. She stretched out one of her hands that were wrapped around her lower abdomen, and lifted Lu Yanqing's chin with her slender fingers. Looking at Lu Yanqing's beautiful face, she sighed, "Such a delicate beauty, and a kind nature. For a woman like you to be able to put down her pride and confess her love to others, how much courage must she have mustered? I just don't understand, what's so bad about you, that Yu Qianqiu could actually harden his heart to reject you. If it was any other man, I'm afraid it would be exactly what they wanted." As soon as these words came out, Lu Yanqing felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her entire body trembled as she looked at the cold and beautiful face in front of her. The other party's clear and wise eyes seemed to be able to directly see through her heart, causing all the secrets in her heart to be exposed. She even knew about this? "I really don't understand what the immortal monarch is saying." Lu Yanqing's entire body trembled as she took a step back, breaking away from the hand that was holding her chin. At this point, she really didn't know what to do, so she could only bite the bullet and not admit it. However, the other party's temperament of being in a high position for countless years really made her feel a little uncomfortable. The world of mortals is laughable, infatuation is the most boring, supercilious is also good. Ji Wu suddenly opened her lips and softly sang a sentence, like a pearl falling on a jade plate, the sound of spring water gurgling, the clear and exquisite voice moving. Then she looked at Lu Yanqing and said with a smile, "This is what you played for me to listen to. Aren't you very open-minded, and also saying that infatuation is the most boring? Why do you still have to keep the secret for Yu Qianqiu? Or rather, this song was originally sung by that fickle Yu Qianqiu?" Lu Yanqing did not hide this point. Under Ji Wu's constant pressure, she finally bit her lips and said, "The songs I played and sang all came from Yu Qianqiu, but it has nothing to do with anything else that the immortal monarch said." A sweet smile appeared on Ji Wu's face, as if she was happy to confirm the answer she wanted to know. She shook her head and said with a smile, "Lu Yanqing, didn't Yu Qianqiu tell you about me?" She was quite confident in her appearance, otherwise, she would not have been able to enter the eyes of the immortal emperor. Presumably, after Yu Qianqiu saw her, he would not be able to forget her, and would unintentionally mention her on some occasions. However, she had overestimated herself and underestimated Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was indeed not a good person. When he saw that she was beautiful, he had dirty thoughts, but it was only once. In fact, he did not care about her at all. If he had to say that he cared about her, it would not be because of the relationship between a man and a woman. It was purely because he was afraid that she and her future husband would deal with him. Lu Yanqing was startled, her eyes flashed for a moment, and then she said suspiciously, "Immortal monarch means that you know Yu Qianqiu? How do you know him? I really have never heard him mention you." "Never heard him mention me?" Ji Wu suddenly smiled a little forced. All women with some beauty, whether they were good or bad, had a common problem. They always thought that they were very attractive to men. They always thought that men would not forget about them and would revolve around them. And the man who ignored her would make her feel uncomfortable. However, Yu Qianqiu was very realistic. No matter how beautiful a woman was, he could not bite her. He was too lazy to think about it. What does it have to do with me? Lu Yanqing shook her head blankly. Indeed, she had not heard Yu Qianqiu mention her. Ji Wu saw that she did not seem to be lying, and her face returned to calmness. She smiled faintly. You should have heard that I was trapped in the heaven and earth Qianquan formation in the human world. In fact, I knew Yu Qianqiu in the human world. If it was not for his help, Brother Crocodile and I would not have been able to return to the immortal world smoothly. So, I already know your origins. Why do you have to hide it? I am just curious. How did you come to the immortal world? People always have to experience more things to mature. Lu Yanqing learned to be obedient this time. It was a big deal. She did not dare to admit it easily. She was a little worried that the other party was lying to her, so she bit her lip and did not answer for a long time. Brother Crocodile once followed Yu Qianqiu to your Lingfang Valley and witnessed the process of you courting Yu Qianqiu. Don't you remember Brother Crocodile at all? Ji Wu reminded with a smile. Was he there that time? Lu Yanqing could not help but recall the unbearable past. Among the people present at that time, there was only one person she did not know. That person's attire was very strange. As the outline of the two roughly matched, Lu Yanqing was slightly surprised. She immediately remembered that Yu Qianqiu also had that strange appearance. Obviously, both of them had changed their appearance. In this way, she vaguely remembered that the person at that time was indeed a bit like the current Yi Shuajuan. Do you remember? Ji Wu shook her head and smiled. In fact, you don't have to worry at all. Only Brother Crocodile and I know about your matter. We didn't think of telling anyone. I didn't want to tell you about this at first. Everyone pretended not to know anything, but... Ji Wu looked up at the immortal palace in the sky and said, Brother Crocodile has not been released until now. I'm afraid he is in trouble. Since Jin Tai went back on his words and thought that I am a pushover, I will go to the immortal palace to find him and punish him. At worst, I will kill him and let him know that I, Ji Wu, am not a pushover. Unfortunately. He looked back at Lu Yanqing and said apologetically, if I knew this would happen, I shouldn't have asked you to come here. Now I have harmed you. But I must do it. Brother Crocodile has done me a great favor. I will fight for Brother Crocodile even if I have to die. When I make my move in the immortal palace, you immediately return to Wuxiong. Maybe there is a chance of survival. Although it is slim, it is better than no hope at all. Lu Yanqing, I am really sorry. After Lu Yanqing understood the whole story, she did not have the fear before death. Instead, she seemed to be unusually calm, not as frightened as before. She smiled faintly and said, I have been implicating others all my life. As long as I can no longer implicate others, so what if I die? As she smiled, 2 crystal tears fell from the corner of her eyes, leaving 2 wet marks on her cheeks. Her eyes were confused, and no one knew what she was thinking of. Silly woman, are you thinking of him again? Ji Wu pulled up the white palace veil and raised her hand to touch her face. She helped her wipe away the tears, thinking that she was thinking of Yu Qianqiu before she died. Then she smiled and comforted, it is good for a woman to have a man that she can miss. Speaking of which, I promised to marry Jin Tai this time. I wanted to let Jin Tai force Yu Qianqiu to come on the day of the wedding. Lu Yanqing asked with tears in her eyes, why? I heard that he is talented, and the songs he makes are very good. Ji Wu threw away her cold and noble temperament and giggled, since I have wronged myself, can't I find someone to vent my anger on? I have to ask him to compose a song for me as a gift for my wedding. Lu Yanqing suddenly smiled through her tears. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Ji Wu suddenly look up at the sky. Following her gaze, she saw a stream of light coming directly from the immortal palace and then landing in the courtyard. A skinny old man with white hair tied behind his head glanced at the two of them. He was carrying a person in his hand. It was the unconscious Yi Xuejun. Chapter 952. Brother Yi. Ji Wu exclaimed, but Yi Xuejun did not react at all. Ji Wu pointed at the person with sharp eyes, "And Gao, what did you do to him?" The person was Gao. His status in the Immortal Palace was not to be underestimated. He was the commander of the law enforcement guard that deterred the entire Immortal Realm. The Immortal Palace Law Enforcement Guard was the #1 thug in the Immortal Realm. His cultivation had reached the middle stage Immortal Emperor. He never appeared in the outside world easily. Once he suddenly appeared in a sect, the sect would be frightened. His appearance usually meant that a sect was about to be exterminated. It did not mean that other sects were no match for him, but his law enforcement guard had many masters. He controlled a large number of the most powerful masters in the Immortal Palace. His strength was quite terrifying. He was the primary force of the Immortal Palace to deter the entire Immortal Realm. In the Immortal Realm, wherever there was a person who disobeyed the orders of the Immortal Palace, they would be there. And Gao was in charge of the law enforcement guard. Naturally, he was one of the most trusted people of Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. He was extremely powerful in the Immortal Realm. Wherever he appeared, it usually represented Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Who in the Immortal Realm was not afraid of him? And Gao looked at Ji Wu expressionlessly. His eyes were as cold as lightning. In the entire immortal world, there were very few people who dared to shout in front of him. If it was in the past, there was no need for him to give her face. But now, things were different. After a moment of silence, Gao finally replied, "Immortal Empress, he insulted the Immortal Emperor. If it were not for Immortal Empress, he would have been dead." This subordinate merely made him shut up. After expressing his respect, he waved his hand at Yi Xuejun, who had fainted on the ground. Yi Xuejun suddenly woke up. "Brother Yi, are you okay?" Ji Wu hurriedly went to help Yi Xuejun, who was staggering to get up. She took the opportunity to check if he was injured and suddenly found that Yi Xuejun's cultivation was all sealed. Ji Wu immediately patted Yi Xuejun's back a few times, but found that the seal could not be undone. She immediately turned back and said angrily, "And Gao, unseal him. I can't do anything about it." The seal on his body was personally made by the Immortal Emperor. "I can't undo it." And Gao slightly clasped his hands together and said, "This subordinate advises Immortal Empress not to act rashly. You also know the Immortal Emperor's methods. If you act rashly, you might even hurt him." "You." Ji Wu was so angry that she didn't know what to say. "Immortal Queen?" Yi Xuejun, who had woken up, grabbed her hand and asked sternly, "Ji Wu, did you agree to that cold-blooded and heartless beast?" When Gao heard this, he immediately warned, "Brother Crocodile, leave some leeway in your mouth. Don't make yourself uncomfortable." Xuejun turned around and shouted angrily, "I don't need you to teach me what to do. Remember this, being Jin Tai's lackey will not end well. I am an example. Sooner or later, you will suffer retribution. Brother Crocodile, you don't have to worry about it. You should take care of yourself first." And Gao knew that it was meaningless to continue talking to him, so he left with a cold snort. "Brother Crocodile, did they do anything to you?" Ji Wu supported him and asked. Yi Xuejun looked at her with a miserable face. He shook his head and said painfully, "You are confused. It's not worth it for me." He naturally understood that the reason why Ji Wu agreed was that Jin Tai used him as a hostage. "I really have no way out." Ji Wu's eyebrows were filled with helplessness. She smiled bitterly and said, "What's more, he promised me that he would let you go." This is also the reason why I agreed to his condition. We have no choice but to take a step back and fight for some unknown possibilities. Maybe there will be a chance when the time comes. What will you do then? Share the same bed with him? Yi Xuejuan grabbed her shoulders and shook her. He roared at the top of his lungs, "At most, I will die. I can't let him succeed. We have no choice but to make choices that are beyond our control." Ji Wu pushed away his hands that were grabbing her shoulders and calmly turned around. She regained her noble temperament and walked towards the colorful crystal palace while saying, "It's easy for him to die, but I, Ji Wu, am not that easy to bully. I have to make him pay for what he has done. Otherwise, it would be too easy for him." As she spoke, her figure disappeared into the Crystal Palace Gate, in the northeastern part of the Eastern Holy Land. Thousands of miles away from the Eastern Holy Land, there were many islands of various sizes scattered in the vast ocean, all formed by volcanic eruptions. Among them, there were still 9 active volcanic islands. The 9 volcanic islands, which were originally the habitat of seabirds, were now under martial law. No one was allowed to enter or leave without permission. Hong Qi floated in the air with his arms crossed, keeping a vigilant eye on his surroundings. Under his master's orders, he had gathered more than 8,000 alchemy cultivators from the cultivation world on these islands and started concocting pills. The recipe for the Great Limit Break pill had been distributed to everyone, but the names of the immortal herbs and the effects of the recipe were hidden from everyone. So no one knew what pill they were making. The storage bags and other things of the 8,000 alchemy cultivators were temporarily kept safe. There was an adequate supply of immortal herbs, but there were guards around to prevent anyone from hiding any immortal herbs. Apart from these taboos, the other aspects of treatment were not bad. Hong Qi announced to them that after completing the refining task, each person would receive a reward of 100 million upper-grade spirit stones. Those with high quality would be rewarded handsomely. In this way, everyone's enthusiasm was greatly aroused. For most people, 100 million upper spirit stones was indeed not a small number. Guan Weiwu, the alchemy pavilion elder of Fuxian Island, who was known as the #1 alchemy expert in the cultivation world, was also among them. However, his treatment was obviously better than the others. He had a private alchemy room that was not monitored by anyone. There was even a person assigned to be on standby outside. At the same time, he was allowed to stroll around the island at will. Of course, he was not allowed to leave this place. It was unknown whether Hong Qi did it on purpose or not. In any case, he arranged it this way. It was not Yu Qianzhou's idea. In fact, Yu Qianzhou did not expect this at all. However, for Guan Weiwu, it was a lot of emotions. Hong Qi had issued an order to the cultivation world from Yu Qianzhou. The old man hid in the alchemy room and wiped his tears a few times. He mistakenly thought that Yu Qianzhou was secretly taking care of him. As a result, the old man, who was already feeling guilty, did not enjoy any privileges at all. It was almost day and night that he desperately refined pills in the alchemy room. Whether it was the quality or the quantity of pills refined, they were shockingly high. In the end, Hong Qi was quite speechless. In the lonely house in the old forest behind the 10,000 demons, Qiu Wuyuan returned the Black Moon Pagoda to his master, Yan Wuchen, with both hands. He left with some doubts in his eyes. He did not know why his master suddenly wanted to take back the Black Moon Pagoda. Yan Wuchen looked at the Black Moon Pagoda in his hand and felt a wave of emotions. He had originally planned to pass the Black Moon Pagoda to Qiu Wuyuan. He did not want to pass it to Yan Bugui or Yan Zhuixing. After all, everyone in the world knew that the Black Moon Pagoda belonged to him. If it was passed to the father and son, once it was exposed, it would definitely bring great trouble to the 10,000 demons. However, after a long talk with Yan Zhuixing recently, he realized that the Black Moon Pagoda was not an ordinary item. It actually had a shocking origin. Moreover, Yan Zhuixing also made it clear that this item was of great use to him. He would not give it up. If Yan Wuchen did not give it to him, he would have to force it from Qiu Yuan. The threat in his words was very obvious. Yan Wuchen was furious, but in the end, he compromised. There was no other reason. Now that his grandson's cultivation was worlds apart from his, it was not something he could control. In addition, he had some selfish motives. Come out. I know you have been hiding behind and eavesdropping. Yan Wuchen held the Black Moon Pagoda in his hand and snorted. Behind the main door of the main hall, the little disciple of the 10,000 demons, Xiaofan, who had been possessed by Yan Zhuixing, turned around and walked out. He bowed to Yan Wuchen's back and said, "Grandfather, I have brought the item for you. But let me warn you, do not bring trouble to the 10,000 demons. Otherwise, I will not let you off even if I become a ghost. Take it." A black flowing light was thrown backward by Yan Wuchen. At such a close distance, Xiaofan did not dodge and allowed the Black Moon Pagoda to strike his head. Suddenly, Xiaofan's cold eyes shone with a demonic red light. It was as if it was a solid object that was directly projected onto the Black Moon Pagoda. The Black Moon Pagoda suddenly stopped a palm's distance away from Xiaofan's forehead. It swayed slightly in the air, and an almost invisible red light flashed on the black moon. Then, the crescent moon-like light moved nimbly inside and outside of the cold Black Moon Pagoda, as if it had a mind of its own, woke up from its deep slumber. Good. The red light in Xiaofan's eyes faded. With a face full of joy, he shouted, "I did not see wrong. It really is a demon blade." His body suddenly turned into 3 wisps of smoke and went around Yan Wuchen in 3 different directions. The 3 wisps of smoke circled around the courtyard for a while before landing in the center of the courtyard and reappearing. This situation caused a flash of light to flash through Yan Wuchen's eyes. The floating Black Moon Pagoda shot out almost at the same time. After circling around Xiaofan in the courtyard for a while, it finally stopped in front of Xiaofan and swayed slowly, as if it was trying to identify something. Under Yan Wuchen's gaze, Xiaofan bit the tip of his finger and drew a blood talisman in the air. Then, he quickly made a series of messy finger seals and shot a spell at the blood talisman floating in the air. The blood talisman immediately shone with a red light and then suddenly shrank into a ball of blood light. As Xiaofan slapped at the blood light, he shouted, "Great demon god technique, now is the time to return. Recognize me as your master." The blood-red light flashed and disappeared in an instant, drilling into the floating Black Moon Pagoda. In an instant, the Black Moon Pagoda trembled violently. A low demonic sound came from the trembling blade, as if a demon that had been sleeping at the bottom of the abyss for countless years was about to awaken. Suddenly, a strong blood-red light burst out from the Black Moon Pagoda. The light shot up into the sky, illuminating the entire courtyard and the forest outside in a bright red light. An overwhelming majestic aura rushed out in all directions like an avalanche. Chapter 953. The birds and beasts in the forest fled in panic. Yan Wuchen, who was in the courtyard, could not open his eyes because of the piercing red light. All he could hear was the sounds of walls collapsing and roof tiles flying in all directions. It was a mess. The strong wind that could sweep away all obstacles gradually subsided, and the red light also suddenly disappeared. Yan Wuchen opened his eyes and was shocked. A giant Black Moon Pagoda that was 100 meters tall appeared in front of him. It was so real, and it did not look like an illusion. On the crescent moon-like blue blade, there was a red light flowing and flickering. The slightly bulging black blade body was covered with dark and shiny demonic patterns. Black smoke wrapped around the blade, and an incomparably ferocious aura was undoubtedly revealed. Xiaofan looked up at it in a daze. He stretched out his arms and slowly floated up, floating in the middle of the crescent. Yan Wuchen suddenly woke up from his shock. He quickly looked around and shouted angrily, "Bastard! What are you trying to do? Do you want to drag the 10,000 demons to eternal damnation?" Xiaofan glanced down and waved his hand. The black crescent rotated and shrank rapidly, flashing along with his figure. After landing, the Black Moon Pagoda had returned to its original appearance. However, it was filled with an ancient aura that was not there before. It seemed unusually heavy and oppressive. The entire Black Moon Pagoda was filled with an indescribable spirituality. It circled around Xiaofan from left to right, east to west, front to back, and seemed to be very excited. The simple and unadorned house had been destroyed by the powerful aura. Yan Wuchen kicked away the collapsed roof beam beside his feet. Xiaofan flashed through the dilapidated house and directly rushed into the cave at the back. The Black Moon Pagoda floated beside Yan Wuchen. At this moment, hundreds of figures flew over from the direction of the 10,000 demons. The palace master of the 10,000 demons, Wuxiao, landed beside Yan Wuchen. Xiao Wuyuan was also among them. Everyone was obviously alarmed by the commotion just now. Everyone looked around at the mess and could not help but look at each other. They did not know what had happened to cause this place to be like this, but they still bowed to Yan Wuchen. Wuxiao, with his white hair tied up by a black crown, came forward and cupped his fists. "Master, what happened? I had some enlightenment just now and could not control myself. I did not want to destroy this place." Yan Wuchen waved his hand at everyone and said indifferently, "You are all busy, not an idle person like me. Go back. I have nothing to do here." Everyone was a little shocked when they heard that. Just now, they all felt that majestic and unparalleled aura. They didn't expect that it was actually the old sect leader's cultivation. It was a little too shocking. Many people caught a glimpse of the enlarged version of the Black Moon Pagoda and couldn't help but glance at the floating Black Moon Pagoda beside Yan Wuchen. They were all secretly trying to figure something out. Wuxiao looked around and respectfully said, "Then we won't disturb Master's cultivation any longer. Disciple will immediately send someone to repair this place after we return." Yan Wuchen nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Everyone bowed and flew back to where they came from. After everyone left, the Black Moon Pagoda beside him rushed into the cave at the back of the mountain with a whoosh. He glanced around and then also rushed into the cave. Man Hu and the others in the cave were like birds startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. They were startled by the commotion outside. Before Xiaofan could ask anything, Yan Wuchen dashed in and shouted, "Bastard! What do you want? Do you want to deliberately cause trouble for my old bones?" Xiaofan smiled faintly and did not take it seriously. He raised his hand and stroked the Black Moon Pagoda floating beside him. He said to himself, "The current Yu Qianqiu is really powerful. He can actually command the world and become the world's #1 master." Then he looked around and asked, "What do you think he is planning by gathering all the alchemy cultivators in the world?" Man Hu and the others shook their heads. They had been trapped here for a long time and did not know what Yu Qianqiu wanted to do. They could not help but look at Yan Wuchen. If there was anyone here who might know what Yu Qianqiu wanted to do, it was Yan Wuchen. Who cares what he is planning? The current Yu Qianqiu's power covers the entire cultivation world. He is not someone you can afford to provoke. So behave yourself and don't think about provoking him again, Yan Wuchen shouted sternly. Xiaofan smiled and did not say anything. He knew that his grandfather was very conflicted. He hoped that he could compete with Yu Qianqiu, but he was also afraid that he would not be a match for Yu Qianqiu. In the end, he would not only harm himself but also implicate the 10,000 demons. After Yan Wuchen left, Xiaofan waved his sleeve and put away the Black Moon Pagoda. He then strode outside. The others felt that something was wrong. Yan Bugue shouted from behind, "Xing, what are you going to do?" Xiaofan stopped in his tracks and turned to look at the few of them. He said confidently, "With my current cultivation and the Devil Blade, I can go anywhere in the world. Moreover, I can't just watch as Yu Qianqiu grows stronger." The meaning of his words was very clear. He wanted to settle the score with Yu Qianqiu. Man Hu immediately said anxiously, Junior brother, didn't you say that with your current cultivation, you can open the passage to the demon world once you get the devil blade? Why don't you open the passage to the demon world first and get strong reinforcements before annihilating Yu Qianzhou and all his forces? Isn't that appropriate? He had suffered losses at the hands of Yu Qianzhou time and time again. Now, he was afraid of Yu Qianzhou. Although Yan Zhuixing's cultivation had reached the soul formation final stage, he was still afraid of his master Bingchengzi. Open the passage to the demon world? Shouchen's eyes flashed fiercely. Do you really think that the people in the demon world will be grateful to us after we open the passage to the demon world? I'm afraid we are no different from ants in their eyes. It's not realistic to expect others to take revenge for us. I have to settle the grudge between me and Yu Qianzhou with my own hands. Otherwise, I won't be able to vent the hatred in my heart. As for opening the demon world, we have to wait until we have enough power in the human world. That's why we have to get rid of Yu Qianzhou, who is a stumbling block in the human world. Then the devil realm, the immortal realm, and the underworld. I want to trample them all underfoot. I want to be the eternal ruler of the three realms. As soon as he said those ambitious words, everyone was dumbfounded. As his father, Yan Bugui swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Be careful. Haste makes waste. Father, don't worry. I won't make the same mistake as last time. Shouchen gritted his teeth. I really underestimated that guy's ruthlessness last time. This time, I will be careful. I'll grab his weakness and kill him in one fell swoop. The last time he was talking about, was the time when he held Lu Yanqing and the others hostage in the Spirit Fang Valley. Who knew that Yu Qianzhou did not care about the lives of Lu Yanqing and the others, and still tried to kill him, to the point that his soul almost flew away. They knew him too well. They knew that once he made a decision, there was no point in trying to persuade him. Yan Bugui sighed. Find a chance to see your mother and sister. See if they're doing well. I'm sure they've been worried about us. Shouchen paused and seemed to recall something. After a long silence, he said slowly, after we leave this place, I'll go to the 100 Flowers Palace. You guys wait here. I believe it won't be long before we don't have to hide anymore. With that, he turned around and left. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked out of the cave, he saw Yan Wuchen slowly turning around. The grandfather and grandson looked at each other silently. Finally, it was Shouchen who broke the silence. Grandfather. I've made up my mind. Don't stop me. I knew you wouldn't give up. Yan Wuchen shook his head and sighed. Listen to me. Endure the humiliation and increase your cultivation. It's never too late to take revenge. My cultivation has reached this stage. If I want to break through again, it's useless to just cultivate. I need to combine movement and stillness, Shouchen explained. Sigh. I can't stop you either. But remember, don't involve the 10,000 demons until the outcome is decided. The 10,000 demons only owe us a favor. They don't owe us anything. Even if you fail, maybe the 10,000 demons can be your escape route. Yan Wuchen didn't look at him anymore. He waved his hand and gestured for him to leave. Shouchen bowed. Then, he turned into a shadow and shot into the clouds, flying away quickly. In the deep forest in the distance, Qiu Wuyuan focused his vision and saw everything. When he saw Shouchen leaving at an unimaginable speed, his expression changed drastically. Not long after Shouchen flew out of the mountain range where the 10,000 demons were entrenched, he suddenly stopped in the air and turned around to look down. No one knew what he had inadvertently discovered, but he quickly flew downwards and directly scuttled into the dense forest. He blocked in front of a woodcutter and said indifferently, "Who are you? Why are you staring at me?" The woodcutter had a short beard. Although he was dressed like a woodcutter, he didn't have any woodcutter's tools. In fact, his tools had already been thrown a few kilometers away. He chuckled and said, "Young master, why do you say that?" Xiaofan looked around and sneered. "You're hopelessly stupid. You're full of flaws. Do you think there's a need to hide? You don't look like someone from the 10,000 demons." After sizing up the woodcutter, he stared at the woodcutter's face. He suddenly narrowed his eyes and said, "I think I've seen you somewhere before. Tell me honestly, who are you? Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." The woodcutter's expression changed slightly. Without another word, he quickly fled into the distance. However, before he could get far, he saw a figure flash in front of him. Two beams of demonic red light pierced his mind, and he immediately fell unconscious. "You dare to show off in front of me with just this bit of ability?" Xiaofan sneered. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" The woodcutter said with a dazed expression, "My name is Hai Wei. I've been ordered to keep watch here." "Hai Wei?" Xiaofan frowned slightly and racked his brains. Suddenly, his gaze turned cold, and his face darkened. "No wonder you look familiar. We've met in cornucopia before. You're one of the 4 subordinates that Yu Qianqiu took in outside cornucopia's spring slumber loft. Why are you keeping watch here? Tell me everything in detail." Chapter 954. After listening to Hai Wei's story, Xiaofan suddenly laughed hysterically and said, "Yu Qianqiu, oh Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, you really don't give up on killing me. You're actually on guard against me to such an extent. Are you afraid of me? Are you afraid of me?" "Huh." It turned out that during the battle at Lingfang Valley, Yan Zhuixing's death had provoked Yu Qianqiu's deep fear. However, after using all his forces to search the entire cultivation world, he couldn't find any traces of Yan Zhuixing at all. Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure out whether Yan Zhuixing was dead or not because the demonic technique was too evil. Coupled with the disappearance of Man Hu and the others from Snowy Mountain, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a huge knot in his heart. Yu Qianqiu had a strong feeling that this matter was definitely not over, but he really couldn't find Yan Zhuixing. He couldn't give up eating for fear of choking and do nothing for Yan Zhuixing. In the end, after repeatedly thinking about it, he came to a conclusion. Yan Zhuixing was already hated by everyone in the cultivation world. Most people wouldn't dare to help him unless they wanted to die. As a result, 10,000 demons and Baihua Palace immediately became his main suspects. This was because Yan Wuchen of 10,000 demons was Yan Zhuixing's grandfather, and Baihua Fairy of Baihua Palace was Yan Zhuixing's mother. In the entire cultivation world, if there were people who would dare to risk their lives to help Yan Zhuixing, it would definitely be these two. After thinking about it, in order not to make too much noise and alert the enemy, Yu Qianqiu sent out his more reliable confidants and had Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun keep watch outside of 10,000 demons. They would keep an eye on the back of the mountain where Yan Wuchen lived. If they found any suspicious people or things, the two of them would immediately inform the Hong Gang and Qing Gang. Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun would immediately use all their power to thoroughly investigate the clues. As long as there was a little evidence that the 10,000 demons were related to Yan Zhuixing, Yu Qianqiu would mercilessly launch a devastating attack on the 10,000 demons. He would find Yan Zhuixing even if he had to scrape the ground. Similarly, Yu Qianqiu didn't let the Flower Palace off either, and he sent Amano and Li Qiuxiang to monitor them in secret. Not many people knew about this. Other than Yu Qianqiu, there were only these 4 people, Hong Qi, and Gu Qingyun. Originally, Yu Qianqiu wanted to directly destroy the 10,000 demons and the Flower Palace so that Yan Zhuixing would have nowhere to hide. However, considering that the demonic art was too strange, he wasn't very confident that he would be able to find Yan Zhuixing, so he left these 2 sects as bait. He didn't believe that Yan Zhuixing could rise again without any support, so he had to find a trustworthy foothold. It could be said that leaving these two sects was to not waste a lot of manpower and resources to search blindly. This kind of setup had to be said to be far-sighted, and he had accidentally encountered it. Yan Juixing didn't even know what was going on. He really resurrected with Yan Wuchen of the 10,000 demons. However, things were always unpredictable. Hai Wei didn't think that Yan Juixing's cultivation level had already reached the soul formation late stage. He was immediately discovered by Yan Juixing as soon as he revealed a bit of information. Yan Juixing immediately figured out the ins and outs of the matter with the power of his magic eye. "You're saying that there are two more people watching the Flower Palace?" Shouchen asked in a deep voice. "Yes." Hai Wei replied respectfully. Shouchen immediately gritted his teeth. While he hated them, he couldn't help but admire Yu Qianzhou. He had come out this time to go to the Flower Palace, but he didn't expect that he had already fallen into Yu Qianzhou's trap. This guy was really terrifying. If he didn't get rid of him as soon as possible, it would be a huge problem. If he hadn't accidentally discovered Hai Wei, he would definitely have rashly barged into the Flower Palace because he had changed his appearance. "Where's the other guy who's watching over the 10,000 demons with you?" Shouchen shouted. Hai Wei pointed into the distance and said, "Young Lord Mo is over there. He and I are each watching an area that people rarely pass by." Yu Qianzhou said that most people who do sneaky things don't dare to do it openly. They can only sneakily take small paths. Anyone that we meet is suspicious. Don't let any of them go. We have to investigate them thoroughly. That B** starred is talking about himself, right? Shouchen was furious. He didn't expect that he would be angered by Yu Qianzhou before he even saw Yu Qianzhou. He suddenly had a thought that he might have a bad start again. He immediately became vigilant. He felt that this guy was too scary. He had to be more careful this time. After calming himself down, he asked indifferently, "Do you know where Yu Qianzhou is now?" "I don't know. I haven't seen him for a long time. If anything happens, I directly inform the people from the Green Gang and Hong Gang," Hai Wei replied. He. The Green Gang and Hong Gang are Yu Qianzhou's lackeys. Shouchen suddenly looked into the distance and sneered. "Yu Qianzhou, it's time for us to have a showdown. What you've given me, I'll give it back to you 10 times, 100 times more. Continue to monitor here. Pretend that you've never seen me." After saying this to Hai Wei, he quickly flew toward the place where Mo Xiaojun was hiding. Now that he had a rough idea of his target, he could easily lure Mo Xiaojun out with his cultivation. After taking control of Shouchen made some inquiries, and the information he obtained was similar to what Hai Wei had said. Regarding Yu Qianzhou, the two only knew some things that happened in Cornucopia, and they were all unimportant things, which made Shouchen very depressed. In the back mountain of the 100 Flowers Valley, Tianyi flew to a remote place. His palms formed a trumpet and made a cuckoo sound. There was movement in the ancient trees not far away. Li Qiuxiang flew over and looked at Tianyi strangely. "Why are you here now? What's the matter? Your man misses you. Can't I come over to see you?" It was not Tianyi's voice. Tianyi did not speak. The voice came from behind. Li Qiuxiang was shocked. She suddenly turned around, but what she saw were two demonic red lights that pierced her heart. In the 100 Flowers Valley, Shouchen strolled toward the mountain gate of the 100 Flowers Palace. He looked around and could not help but sigh. Previously, he was like a rat on the street that everyone wanted to beat up. He did not dare to return even if he had a home. This time, if he had not changed his appearance, it would probably be inconvenient for him to return. Thinking that all of this was caused by Yu Qianzhou, he could not help but grit his teeth. "Halt!" The two disciples guarding the 100 Flowers Palace flashed out. They pushed their palms at Shouchen and shouted, "This place is not for trespassing. Report if there's anything. If there's nothing, leave immediately." Xiaofan was stunned. Only then did he remember that he was no longer the young palace master who could enter and leave the 100 Flowers Palace at will. However, since he dared to come so brazenly, he naturally prepared an excuse. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm a serving disciple under consecrated Yen of the 10,000 demons. This time, I'm here to visit the 100 Flowers Palace Master under the orders of the ancestral master. I have something to tell you. Please report it." After the Yen clan's father and son caused a ruckus all those years ago, Supporting Immortal Island had seized the opportunity to eliminate all the disciples related to the Myriad Devil Palace. It could be said that Supporting Immortal Island had seized the opportunity to take control of the Flower Palace. Hearing that it was a disciple of the 10,000 demons, the disciples guarding the gate shouted angrily, "Our palace master does not want to see anyone from the 10,000 demons." Xiaofan's expression changed. With his cultivation, he could easily barge into the 100 Flowers Palace, but he was afraid that there would be scouts sent by Yu Qianqiu in the surroundings. He was afraid that he would attract unnecessary trouble, so he came openly, but he still ran into trouble. At that moment, someone called out from inside, "Let him in." The voice was as pleasant as an aureole. Xiaofan looked up and his expression eased a lot. It was none other than his younger sister, Yan Zixia. Actually, Baihua Fairy and her daughter did not want to see anyone from the 10,000 demons, otherwise, the Supporting Immortals Island would not have been able to control the 100 Flowers Palace so easily. However, Yan Zixia, who happened to pass by, recognized this Xiaofan. She knew that he was someone who had been serving Grandpa for a long time and had never seen the 10,000 demons. Since he suddenly appeared here, there must be something important, so she let him in. Yan Zixia curiously looked at the approaching Xiaofan and asked, "Xiaofan, why are you here instead of staying by Grandpa's side?" "Greetings, young miss." Xiaofan reluctantly bowed and said, "Founding Master told me to pass a message to the Baihua Palace Master." "Ah." Yan Zixia didn't think much of it and nodded, "Then come with me." She then led Xiaofan into the 100 Flowers Palace. Inside the 100 Flowers Palace, the famous beauty of China's cultivation world already had some white hair on her temples, causing Xiaofan, who was standing below, to feel a bit worried and forgot to bow. Baihua Fairy's elegance didn't diminish as she sat on the highest seat in the hall, observing Xiaofan below and frowned, "If you have something to say, then say it." Xiaofan regained his senses, looked at the maids around him, then knelt down and kowtowed, "This junior greets the palace master, greets the palace master." Seeing him bowing so respectfully, Baihua Fairy was a bit surprised, but after a bit of hesitation, her expression became a bit more friendly as she raised her hand. "No need to be so polite, just say it." Xiaofan looked up, "This junior brings a private message," but he sent his voice, "Palace master, please leave. Founding Master told me to bring news of the young Palace Master." Hearing that, Baihua Fairy's expression changed, but quickly returned to normal, glanced around and waved her hand, "All of you leave." "Zixia, you also leave." Yan Zixia was a bit surprised, but still obediently left with the maids. When only the two of them were left in the hall, Baihua Fairy suddenly stood up, quickly set up a soundproof barrier around the hall and asked with excitement, "Just now, who did you say you brought news of?" Although she understood what he said, she still didn't believe it, because she had always thought that her son was killed by Yu Qianqiu, but now there's news of her son, so how could she not be excited? Xiaofan was also a bit excited. After kowtowing 3 times, he looked up at Baihua Fairy and spoke with a choked voice, "Your son has been unfilial, I've made mother worry." Hearing that, Baihua Fairy's face paled as she stared at the kneeling person, stuttering, You, what did you call me?" Chapter 955. Your son was heavily injured after a fierce battle with that traitor named Yu in Spirit Fong Valley. I almost lost my life, luckily Grandpa took me in and saved my life. Xiaofan immediately knelt down and told his mother the gist of what happened. He was very confident in his mother, not worried that Baihua Fairy would leak the secret. Then he said, "Before I left, Father specifically told me to come and see if mother and sister are doing well. Bai Hua Fairy felt like she was struck by lightning, stunned on the spot, still in disbelief. You said you're Xing heir? No, that's impossible. You can change your appearance, but your height. The body possession thing was too strange, even Yan Juexing himself was shocked by it, so he didn't tell Bai Hua Fairy about it. Shou Chen stood up straight. Your son has practiced a divine martial art, changing my appearance is nothing to me, just wait for me to restore my appearance for mother to see. Saying so, he clapped his hands together, putting his index and middle fingers together in between his eyebrows, shouting, appearance is born from the heart, return my true body. A wave of black killing intent came out from his body, enveloping his entire body. A series of cracking sounds could be heard. When the black fiend was absorbed back into his body, Yan Juexing's original appearance was revealed in the hall, wearing a smaller set of clothes. Bai Hua Fairy had never seen such a strange thing before, so shocked that she couldn't say anything. After a while, she slowly walked down from the high seat, staring at Yan Juexing and asked, are you really my Xing heir? You really didn't die? I remember when I first started cultivating, Mother brought me to the rooftop to look at the stars in the night sky. You said that the Xing in my name is the same as the stars in the sky, they both shine. I then told Mother that when I grow up, I will take down the brightest star in the sky and give it to Mother. I remember how happy Mother was at the time. Yan Juexing smiled and said. This was something that happened a very, very long time ago, only the two of them knew. In an instant, Bai Hua Fairy's eyes became misty as she rushed forward and embraced Yan Juexing, speaking emotionally, you really are my Xing heir, you really aren't dead. Mother, don't worry. That traitor surnamed you won't be able to kill me. Yan Juexing gritted his teeth and said, I came back this time to settle the score with him. As long as I get rid of him, our family can reunite. Bai Hua Fairy suddenly pushed him away, panicking, you still want to find Yu Qianqiu? No, the current Yu Qianqiu was no longer the same as before. His power was far too great, and even the hundreds of demigod stage lords from the various nations were under his command. You can't beat him. Isn't it better to hide your identity? I don't ask for a family reunion, I only ask that you two be safe. Mother, you don't have to worry. Your son is no longer the same as before. If I didn't have absolute confidence in winning, why would I come out to die in vain? Yan Juexing coldly laughed, he made it impossible for our family to reunite. The pain he made me suffer, I will return it to him 1,000 times over. How can I let him continue to be so arrogant in the cultivation world? If I don't get my revenge, I'm not a man. No, we won't get our revenge. Our family didn't lose anything anyway, we're all alive and well. Bai Hua Fairy grabbed Yan Juexing's arm and said, I've heard about you practicing demonic arts. As soon as you show your face in the cultivation world, you'll be surrounded and attacked by the entire cultivation world. I can't even imagine that. Mother, I really don't want to suffer the pain of losing my son anymore. Yan Juexing scowled, surrounded and attacked? With just them? Humph. They're nothing but a bunch of fence-sitters, they'll listen to whoever's fist is stronger. As long as I kill that traitor surnamed you, who else would dare to come and die? No, even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for your little sister. Bai Hua Fairy didn't let him off the hook. Little sister? What does this have to do with her? Yan Juexing scowled. Bai Hua Fairy powerlessly shook her head. When Yu Qianqiu was still cultivating on Fu Xian Island, he had already met your little sister. The two of them were originally in love with each other, the only difference was that they were going to marry each other, but then because of the grudge between you and Yu Qianqiu, your little sister's heart was broken. When she found out that you were killed by Yu Qianqiu, your little sister would often cry in secret. The two of you kept fighting, the one who was hurt the most was your little sister. One was her own brother, the other was someone she liked. What would your little sister do? I can tell that your little sister still likes him. Even if you can win against Yu Qianqiu, what would your little sister do after you kill Yu Qianqiu? Do you want her to wash her face with tears every day? Yan Zhuixing was stunned. Not even in his dreams could he imagine that Yu Qianqiu would seduce his little sister. In fact, ever since Yu Qianqiu cut off his love with the brilliant sword, he didn't put this matter to heart. He didn't know that the female lead of the story would be so infatuated that the story would become so melodramatic. If he had to blame something, he could only blame his dirty hands at the time. He shouldn't have touched Yan Zixia so carelessly. For some women, as long as you don't cross the line, there won't be much of a problem, but once you cross a certain line, it'll be very troublesome. Coincidentally, Yan Zixia was this kind of woman, deeply rooted in love. Bastard, bastard, despicable. Yan Zhuixing was so angry that his body trembled. He didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to make a move behind his back and take advantage of him first. He was so angry that his eyes faintly emitted red light. He gritted his teeth and said, "Mother, don't be naive. Maybe sister has feelings for him, but that guy is not a good person. Even if I let him go, he won't let me go, you probably don't know that. He's already placed people around Baihua Palace. As soon as I show up, he'll kill me. I guarantee that no matter who pleads for me, he won't let me go." Saying so, he clasped his hands together and shouted, "Appearance comes from the heart, borrow my avatar." A black fiend appeared and covered his entire body, followed by the sound of bones cracking. When the black fiend retracted, he returned to his usual appearance, turned around and left. Baihua Fairy hurriedly grabbed him again. "What are you trying to do? Can't even I talk to you?" Unexpectedly, a gust of wind pushed her back a few steps. Yan Zhuixing suddenly turned around. "That animal dared to play with my little sister's feelings. I definitely won't let him go. I'll give him a taste of his own medicine. Just wait until I've also played with his woman, then I'll let him have a taste of what it's like. Don't worry, mother, it's better to get the pain over with. After I kill him, as time passes, my little sister will naturally walk out of the shadow. Do you want your little sister to hate you for the rest of her life?" Baihua Fairy shouted. "Hating me for the rest of my life is better than falling in love with someone you shouldn't love and being sad for an outsider." Yan Zhuixing casually formed a hand seal, freezing Baihua Fairy in place, only regaining her senses after Yan Zhuixing left about a minute later. After the relationship between the four major clans and Bai Changchun was exposed, their status in the cultivation world had suddenly increased. Logically speaking, the Bai clan of the four major clans had the greatest honor, but in fact, the Wu clan was in the limelight. The reason for this was none other than the fact that Wu family has a daughter named Wu Lixue, the woman of the current Yaogui realm's torture envoy, the strongest expert in the world. This was something that Yu Qianqiu had personally admitted. Who in the world didn't know about it? Nowadays, the entire cultivation world no longer has any national boundaries. Everyone lived in harmony with each other. Therefore, the current Wu clan's Hat Island was extraordinarily bustling. Cultivators from all over the world frequently visited this place, and the Wu clan had become the most prosperous, lively, and largest auction venue in the entire cultivation world. Wealth was rolling in, and it could be said that they had earned a lot of money. However, it was useless even if others were jealous. No one dared to do anything to Wu family. Who told Wu family to have a daughter named Wu Lixue, and Wu Lixue was Yu Qianqiu's woman? Who in the world would dare to touch Wu family? Gula House was a restaurant opened by Wu family on Hat Island, as well as the largest and best restaurant on Hat Island. Shouchen changed out of the myriad demons' palace's attire and ordered a table of food and wine. He sat alone by the window and slowly drank his wine. He looked at the bustling scene of people coming and going on the streets below, and his expression was dark and gloomy. Everything that happened that year felt like it happened just yesterday. It was here that he first met Wu Lixue, the first woman in his life who could make his heart beat faster. He didn't know why he was attracted to Wu Lixue. In fact, he had seen many women who were more beautiful than Wu Lixue, but he had never felt the way he did when he saw Wu Lixue. He didn't know what he liked about Wu Lixue. Perhaps it was her innocent smile that could make her big eyes look like crescent moons, or her lively cuteness, or even her stupid words. In short, everything about her had an astonishing allure to him. Unfortunately, Wu Lixue came with Yu Qianzhou, who he hated to the bone. However, at that time, he had a good relationship with him, and they called each other brothers. Perhaps they could have been very good friends. Later, some accidents happened, and Wu Lixue was violated by the son of the Daluo sect master. Logically speaking, since he liked Wu Lixue, he should have stepped forward bravely. However, he was filled with misgivings at the time. The Daluo sect was truly powerful at the time, and he was a man with great ambitions. How could he ruin his plans by offending the Daluo sect for the sake of a woman? Even now, he still felt a dull ache in his heart when he thought about it. He had spent countless nights vexed over it. If the situation had happened now, he would definitely have stepped forward bravely to save the damsel in distress, and he would definitely have won Wu Lixue's favor. However, there were no ifs for what had already happened. At that time, he was the young palace master of the 100 Flowers Palace, and he didn't dare to do it, but that little disciple of Fuxian Island did it instead. He simply threw caution to the wind and publicly announced that Wu Lixue was his woman. He even beat up the son of the Daluo sect master for Wu Lixue, and because of that, he formed a deep grudge with the Daluo sect. However, with effort comes reward, and Yu Qianzhou really captured the heart of the beauty. Wu Lixue had a good impression of him on the spot, and he could see it from the shy look in Wu Lixue's eyes when she looked at Yu Qianzhou at that time. Her shy look cut into his heart like a knife, and he wished that he could go back in time and let the situation repeat itself. He would definitely stand up for Yu Qianzhou and stand up for her. However, a missed opportunity was a missed opportunity, and it was impossible to go back in time. So what if his heart ached? He didn't do anything wrong at that time, because he was a person with great ambitions. No matter what, his actions were more rational than Yu Qianzhou's. Chapter 956. Later on, Yu Qianzhou was expelled from the Fuxian Island because he had made too many troubles. However, it was inconceivable that he had become the disciple of Bai Changchun, the torture envoy of the demon ghost region, who was the #1 expert in the world. This traitor was really lucky. However, his luck was not bad either. He had cultivated the treasure book left by the demonic god. What happened later was known by everyone in the world. He and Yu Qianzhou had become mortal enemies. However, he had failed several times when they fought against each other. However, this was not what made his heart ache the most. What made his heart ache was that the two of them had turned the act into reality. Wu Lixue had truly become Yu Qianzhou's woman. Even so, when he fought against Yu Qianzhou, he had never thought of hurting her. But, that traitor Yu Qianzhou had actually made a move against his younger sister. This was truly unbearable. Since he couldn't obtain her, then he, Yu Qianzhou, shouldn't even think about obtaining her, Lady Wu. Lady Wu. Madam Yu. The flattering noises on the street made Shouchun come back to himself. Shouchun's pupils shrank suddenly. He looked at the crowd on the street. 4 or 5 young ladies in the Wu clan's clothes were chattering and protecting a lady who had a pet crow on her shoulder. That lady was Wu Lixue. A group of young ladies were high-spirited. Because of Wu Lixue, they enjoyed the respectful gazes of the people on both sides and walked into the gula house. The crowd on the street became bustling again. Many ladies from different sects looked back at the gula house enviously from time to time. Some of them stopped to look at the gula house and didn't want to leave. Their facial expressions kept changing as if they were imagining something. Maybe they were imagining how great it would be if they were Yu Qianzhou's woman. Lady Wu, you are here. Amidst the waiter's compliments, a series of footsteps came up the stairs. 5 to 6 women appeared in Shouchun's sight. Wu Lixue was still the same as before. Time had not left any traces on her face, but there seemed to be a hint of sadness between her brows. She no longer had the innocent smile she used to have. This made Shouchun's heart clench slightly. It seemed like she did not have a good life with Yu Qianzhou. Wu Lixue's clear eyes glanced at Shouchen, but she didn't pay much attention to him. Then, under the guidance of the waiter, the group of ladies entered the private room facing the river. After the waiter came out, the girls sitting around the table immediately chattered. Then the door closed, and Wu Lixue, who was sitting in the middle, disappeared behind the door. However, with Shouchen's hearing, he could tell that the girls were talking about Wu Lixue. Yu Qianzhou's name kept popping up. Shouchen raised the wine glass to his lips, forgetting to drink. He looked at the closed door absent-mindedly. Later, when the waiter served the dishes, the door closed several times, and he saw Wu Lixue several times. Wu Lixue seemed to sense that someone was looking at her. She also looked curiously at him, who was sitting alone by the window outside. She felt like they had met before, but at the same time, she didn't know him. The crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder had its eyes closed most of the time. It would open occasionally, but it seemed to be dozing off most of the time. It didn't leave Wu Lixue's shoulder at all. After the dishes and wine were served, the door to the private room was gently closed by the waiter. It didn't open for a long time, and only the chattering could be heard from inside. Shouchen let out a soft sigh and drank the wine he had raised to his lips. When he refilled his wine, he realized that the wine in the flask had already been emptied. He called for the waiter to bring a few flasks of wine. When the waiter came down with the wine, he shook his head. He thought that this was another person drowning his sorrows in wine. This kind of person was common. Sister Lixue, Yu Qianzhou hasn't come to see you for so many years. What has he been doing? I don't know either. Sister Lixue, if Yu Qianzhou comes next time, you must bring us to see him. He. The #1 expert in the world. I heard that he's very powerful. So many people are afraid of him. Shouchen, who was drinking alone, suddenly froze. He suddenly turned to look at the closed door and narrowed his eyes. This conversation immediately attracted his attention. Immediately inside the private room, a group of ladies who acted like reserved ladies in front of outsiders had already revealed their true colors. They toasted each other and drank happily. Their aura wasn't any weaker than that of the men. Wu Lixue's innocent nature also broke out when she was in the mood to drink. The trace of sadness between her eyebrows turned into high spirits. She rolled up the sleeves of her hands, revealing a pair of white and tender arms that were like pink lotus roots. She happily joined the ranks of the people who were pouring wine into each other's mouths. It could be seen that this group of ladies had done such crazy things behind the backs of their elders. However, the crow suffered. It didn't seem to have a good impression of the wine. It jumped on Wu Lixue's shoulder and used its butt to express its protest to everyone. Miss Wu Lixue, do you want to know why Yu Qianzhou hasn't come to see you for so many years? Do you want to know where Yu Qianzhou is right now? Do you want to know what he's doing now? I'm Yu Qianzhou's friend. I just came back from Yu Qianzhou's place. If you want to know anything about Yu Qianzhou, I'll stay in the forest in the west for a short while before I leave. Remember, Yu Qianzhou is currently doing something important. It's not convenient for too many people to know about it. It's best if you come alone quietly and don't alarm others. I won't wait for you if you're late. The sudden sound transmission caused Wu Lixue, who was having a great time, to be startled. Someone immediately asked, Sister Lixue, what's wrong? Nothing. Wu Lixue shook her head. However, she quickly left the banquet and opened the door. She saw that the table facing the window was empty, but the person sitting by the window was gone. Could it be that he was the one who sent the voice transmission just now? Wu Lixue muttered to herself. She silently closed the door and sat back at the banquet. She frowned and pondered. A few of her drinking friends noticed her abnormality and asked, "What's wrong?" Wu Lixue glanced at the few of them and muttered, "I want to go out into the forest alone, but I don't want anyone to recognize me." Does anyone have any ideas? The women looked at each other with understanding expressions. As Yu Qianzhou hadn't come to see Wu Lixue for a long time, Wu Lixue was often depressed. Because of this, the family sent them to think of ways to accompany Wu Lixue. The women mistakenly thought that Wu Lixue wanted to go out alone to relax. They didn't think much of it. You're going out alone. I'm afraid it's not safe. It's better for us to accompany you. Someone voiced out their concerns. Subsequently, someone else added, that's right. If something were to happen to you, it might provoke Yu Qianzhou to come and punish us. With your famous temper, our Wu clan wouldn't be able to bear it. Wu Lixue had a naive temperament, but she wasn't a fool. She knew what everyone was worried about. Because of Yu Qianzhou, the Wu clan's glorious future was all pinned on her. The entire Wu clan treated her like a pearl in their palm and wouldn't let her take any risks. However, after thinking about it, she felt that nothing would happen. It was also because of Yu Qianzhou. Who in the world would dare to touch her? She paused for a moment and said, I can't think of anyone who would harm me, and I don't think anyone would dare to do so. I'm just going to take a walk around the Wu clan and we'll be back soon. Nothing will happen. The women looked at each other and felt that it was true. With Yu Qianzhou's current power and cultivation, would anyone dare to touch Wu Lixue? No one would dare to do so even if they had 100 guts. But if the clan knows that we let you go out alone, all of us will be punished. Someone whispered, but from the tone, it could be heard that they were already relieved. It doesn't matter. I will go out for a walk quietly and will be back soon. No one will find out. Even if someone finds out and the clan punishes all of you, I will definitely come forward and plead for leniency for all of you. I guarantee that nothing will happen to all of you. Wu Lixue confidently patted her big chest like a man. Her naive temperament was undoubtedly revealed. The women were originally in a dilemma. They didn't dare to go against the clan's instructions, but they also didn't want to make Wu Lixue unhappy. Because all the clans had secretly instructed them to please Wu Lixue so that they could obtain Wu Lixue's support in the clan's internal struggle for power. This was a crucial matter. With Wu Lixue's guarantee, everyone immediately heaved a sigh of relief. No one doubted Wu Lixue's powerful influence in the Wu clan. As long as Wu Lixue came forward to plead for leniency, even the clan head and clan elders would have to give face. Most importantly, the women were extremely confident that no one in the world would dare to touch a single hair of Wu Lixue. In a situation where nothing happened, they could still make Wu Lixue happy. Why wouldn't they do it? But how can we not let others recognize you? A woman looked at everyone and asked, does anyone know how to disguise themselves? The women shook their heads. Then, someone seemed to think of something and clapped her hands. She took out a white gauze hat from her storage bag and smiled. Just wear this to cover your face. Thank you. Wu Lixue's eyes lit up. Her naive and playful personality came out again. After receiving it, she immediately put it on her head and asked, how is it? How is it? Can you recognize me? The women's eyes focused on her impressive figure. They realized that although they couldn't see her face, her figure could be recognized by those who had seen her before. Wu Lixue followed everyone's gaze and looked at herself. She immediately pouted and understood. I have a way. Another person happily clapped his hands and took out a black female shawl robe from his storage pouch. He handed it over and said, you just need to wear this. With a veil on your head, no one will be able to recognize you. Wu Lixue took it and immediately tried it on. The women cheered after seeing it and confirmed that it worked. No one would be able to recognize her. However, there was still a slightly older person who was worried. Younger sister Lixue, don't take too long. Go and come back quickly. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.